division begins to determine how it will respond to the report's findings and recommendations, I want to hear from parents, caregivers, and community members. In early October, I began to make plans to host a virtual listening session to get feedback from parents, families, and community advocates on the findings and recommendations of the 3-year audit that was just completed. I will also sponsor a virtual roundtable discussion, which is where I'm scheduled to join representatives from the Special Olympics and FCPS Inclusion Day, formerly known as Spread the Word to End the Word. This virtual discussion will feature a frank conversation
they wanted to help
about
special education kids.
Spotlight opportunities for students and others to get involved in countywide efforts to promote a caring and inclusive
give
school
the
community.
Parents a chance at
And I am continuing my
at their hearings.
in our schools.
Just so you guys
Last
know,
weekend,
I since this was going, I just went ahead and started the live stream.
Okay.
So I'm not going to worry about the show intros and whatnot since this is going. This seems to be pretty important. So
Yeah,
we'll let this go and then you can give some background.
Yeah, once she's done with her fake apology, I'll turn the volume down and then do introduction.
And inclusive for all students. My hope is that such teams would provide accountability for our schools that includes input from our parents and continuous improvement mechanism that focuses on how we ensure we are recognizing whether students feel respected, irrespective of their ability. Dr. Reed has already taken action on this, and I look forward to this continued work. Since my first day in office, my priority has been progressing education for all in FCPS. In light of the recent events, I want everyone to know that the children of Fairfax County, thank you, are still my number one important item.
Item 3.02, announcement.
Oh, wow.
If you'd like to
I'm
review
turn
a
the
copy
volume down.
Hey, Harry, I got it. I'm here. I got it. I got it. I'm going to be here for a few.
/school board/board docs. Tonight's meeting is being broadcast on channel 99 and live streamed on the website.
All right, folks, if you're just tuning in, we just kind of jumped into this. This is Sam coming from the background. My apologies about the low quality video feed. Obviously, it's very low resolution and very jumpy. So there's nothing we can do about that at this point. The audio is coming through relatively clear, though. So
2020 honor reflects military value and tradition of life and the Constitution of the United States of America. Veterans Day, formerly Armistice Day, is the anniversary of Armistice, which was signed on November 11th, 1918.
That was a little annoying. Sorry about that.
Hey, Harry, I need to ask you. I don't know what's going on, but on our end here, the video it looks like dial-up modem, dude. It's bad, and it keeps.
Do you want to take over?
Well, I mean, I can for a while, but I can't stay for the whole show tonight. Remember?
Yeah, no, we'll switch over then. I'll bring in. Yeah, why don't you just take over, and then we can do it at the intro, and pick up since we're already live.
Well, so do you want me to tap into the stream rather than you sending it to me?
Yeah, you just tap into the stream.
All right. I don't know what's going on. Is it?
Yeah, no, it's something going on with this machine that I have back here. I thought it was running, and then for some reason it's just running slow. Right. But I'll reboot it and we'll get it corrected.
Okay, let me mute the audio then. Why don't you guys? I'll just leave this until I get it set. It'll take me a minute or two. Go ahead and do the setup. Go ahead.
All right.
Brian or Stephanie, why don't you guys go ahead and give a little bit of background here as to what we're going to be dealing with tonight. I'm going to go ahead and change this stream for Harry.
Sure thing. Let me give a little background on the school board member that you just heard talking right before we kind of came on, or as we were coming on. I think in the previous board meeting, in reference to the board policy, she called it retarded. And all the left-wing Marxists came out of the woodwork and said
So
that was
setting that up.
the greatest sin ever. So tonight, wanted to go over tonight's word of the day is we're going to give the proper definition of retard, because just like we don't allow China to tell us we can't navigate open seas, we don't allow Marxists to tell us what words we can use. So retard, the proper definition is to delay or impede the development or progress of. This will up especially by preventing or hindering advance or accomplishment. So we've got a couple examples. So blocking sunlight from a plant will retard its growth. That is not pejorative in any way. It's just a scientific fact. Second example, locking kids out of school for over a year as a result of a relatively innocuous virus retarded the academic growth of all Fairfax students. And that's our word of the day that we will continue to use appropriately, but not in a pejorative way against anybody who.
Such as our school board member that did so such as our school board member Karen Keys-Gamarra that did so, that disrespecting not only the entire audience, but she's an at-large member, all the constituents across Fairfax County, and clearly shows her mentality and her attitude towards those with disabilities.
I don't know if she disrespected the community. She was basically insulting her fellow board members, but
it's still disrespectful to. It still is unprofessional to use as a sitting school board member. I mean, and she used the term when they were talking about anti-Semitic activity that was going on in Fairfax County schools that was being brought to their attention, of a speaker that they interrupted. All right, so let's go over introductions. We're live. Welcome to another episode of the Shadow Board. Tonight we have with us our normal panelists, Mr. Brian Davison, Stephanie Lunquist-Arora, and a special guest, Sarah Higdon, a co-founder for Trans Against Groomers, as well as a contributing member for Gays Against Groomers. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you for having me. This is interesting. I'm sitting here thinking, what have you guys got me into right now? So this should be fun.
This is fun, yes. This is Fairfax County. We're a little bit extra when it comes to education. We put our school board members on blast. For those of you that are just joining that are not familiar with what the Shadow Board is, this is basically us as parents critiquing and providing insight, context to some of the issues that are going on within Fairfax County's public schools. This is the 15th largest school district in the U.S. We have over a $4 billion budget, and yet we've got like a 24-year-old that sits as a school board member that still lives at home with her parents, and another one whose highest level of education is simply high school and uses public funds for a dog park as a convenience for his own personal benefit. So we have a lot to talk about. And interestingly enough, we'll talk about some of the things that they've been pushing within Fairfax CRT, critical race theory, that they're trying to again push through anti-racist curriculum that they're using to fund. And on the subject of special needs, and ESSER funds are only trying to allocate $9.50 per special needs student to address their needs for learning loss during the pandemic. And the rest of those funds they want to push for anti-racist curriculum. And then we'll talk about transgender policy, where they want to hide from parents when children are experiencing gender dysphoria or they're changing their identity at school, keeping that away from parents and just completely keeping them out of the loop. So let's talk about that. Oh, as well as providing to them a gender affirming care, which could include medical treatment without parental knowledge or consent. And this goes back to, I think we should also talk, I think we lost our other guests. Are they here? And this also reminds us, as a reminder, Pride Liberation Project, that was the organization of activists with the involvement of adults that actually go into the Gay Student Alliance clubs, which are not official clubs, they don't have rosters, where they have been encouraging children to, enticing them, offering them money to run away from home, to be in the care of a affirming adult, and as well as hiding their whereabouts from their parents should they not have an affirming household. Now, what does that mean? It's interesting. I think most of us would call that kidnapping. Sarah, that might be news to you, but that actually was released by the police earlier last week.
Yeah, I didn't
I'll let
know
you process that.
I don't think it was this situation. I will tell you, I've heard of this happening in other places. We know that they just passed a law in California that basically says anybody can get gender affirming care in California without parental consent, basically if they run away from their parents and flee to California. So it's a big issue. And I've also seen like chat rooms, school boards setting up, or schools setting up chat rooms with LGBT, like for LGBT adults to talk to LGBT parents, which just reminds me of like the Prostasia chat rooms, like, which is like a pro pedo organization that's like, yes, if you're 13 or over, you should be talking to adults. Yeah, that's what the chat rooms go down to 13 and over. So it's pervasive,
Wow.
quite around the country.
So Sarah, tell us about your background. How did you tell about your origin story? How did you become involved in activism?
Yeah, so well, I served in the Army for 7.5 years. When I got out of the Army, I moved to Atlanta, where I live now. And I basically was diagnosed with gender dysphoria after I got out. So I started transitioning back in March of 2019. And then, with everything in 2020, I was found myself needing to, I was out of a job. I needed to do some stuff. So I started my YouTube channel, which is just Sarah Higdon, youtube.com/Sarah Higdon. And that's kind of where it started. I made friends with a lot of people in the LGBT space that are prominent members of the LGBT, like right-wing coalition of the LGBT. And so it kind of stemmed from there. And yeah, when all this kind of started kicking off, I started speaking out a lot more, and I've been gaining traction over the last year and now doing events. I was just up in Richmond less than a month ago doing an event with No Left Turn Education up there, doing a panel, speaking out. And then I'm doing an event next week with the Independent Women's Network up in Rhode Island. And so we're basically, trying to get out here and stop, what we're seeing as everybody's harming children. We shouldn't be harming children. We shouldn't be medicalizing children, because that is, it's harm. And, and that's really why it's important that I stand up, especially being as a trans woman myself. I understand what this means and what these kids are going through most of the time. And most of the time, these kids don't need medicalization. They need love. And most kids are going to grow out of it. Even countries around the world are starting to see this, and that's why they're changing all their guidance. So it's really going to be interesting to see how long it takes for the U.S. to catch up to the rest of the world when it comes to medicalization of children.
Wow.
Sarah, I really appreciate your activism. Yeah, this is great. And also, I was reading, maybe it was on a website you had, but I was reading something about you where you said people use assumptions based on any kind of defining part of somebody's demographic about what their political space is or where they should be. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate I'm personally a libertarian too, so I really appreciate that philosophy. Is you shouldn't be able to just look at somebody and be like, oh, I think you look this way, so you should this in this political space or so. Anyways, I checked out your website, so yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I'm kind of everywhere. I try to be everywhere. I think that, yeah, I talked about it a couple weeks ago. My friend Ariel Scarcella, who's a big name in the activism space, she's been on YouTube since 2009. She's a good friend of mine, and she had me on her channel. And yeah, I said that because that was the question. Like, do people expect you to be progressive? And the answer is yes, and because they expect you to fit their mold. And essentially that's transphobic in and of itself, because they want to put you in this little box politically just because you are a certain type of person.
I understand completely what you mean completely. I'm black. I'm supposed to be a Democrat. Yeah. I get it.
Oh, picture time.
Oh, here we go.
We can't.
So Sarah,
we can't get through a meeting without at least like 10 pictures. We have to do
about 10 pictures.
Like this is gonna
so instead of actual work, what you'll notice is that our school board, when they start at 7:00, they'll go for about an hour to an hour and a half, taking pictures and giving each other awards for work that they're not doing. Amazingly enough, we had, what was it, from Open FCPS? No, Fairfax County Parents Association. They actually went through video for 3,200 minutes of video from the school board meetings last year, and they spent under 2 hours talking about academics at a school board meeting. Through the entire year, less than 2 hours total. So
That's insane.
So we have a lot of inside jokes. They like to say what the main thing is. Well, we know it's not talking about education.
Well, they don't talk about education because they're not teaching our kids anything at this point, and we see that with all the test scoring across the country.
Oh, and they've plummeted here. We saw that kind of that prepared apology from a school board member that used the R word. It's almost like it's almost 3 times. She used it 3 times. And she's a garden at Lytton, as a professional line of work. So this is a person that's supposed to represent the best needs of a child. So say if she's dealing with a child who's mentally disabled, we now know what she really thinks of them. So it kind of makes you wonder: is she qualified, or are those kids actually safe? Is she actually advocating for them? But she used that word while being presented with being informed that there was anti-Semitic hatred, acts of hate in some of the area high schools, and they just wanted to shut that down. So it's like you don't know what to focus on. It's all bad. There's no way to look at that.
Well, we do have differences of opinion on the show.
What was that?
Okay, in her defense, in this case, she actually wanted to let that speaker keep talking. So when she uttered that awful word, which I don't think she should have said, she was actually trying to say we should allow this woman to keep speaking when everyone else eventually shut her down. So they wanted to suspend the rules because Sarah, it was like the person who signed up wasn't the person who got up to speak, but she had like power of attorney or something. So it was just a strange situation, but she was talking about something which was very important, anti-Semitism in the schools and her opposition to critical race theory, which went against what they were trying to push. But actually, in this case, Karen Keys-Gamarra was trying to allow her to continue speaking, but it used very bad words when she was advocating for that.
It's literally Matt Damon's character.
We all have different opinions on the show, right? So you can feel free to take your own. Obviously, I don't necessarily agree with Harry and Stephanie on this. I don't really kowtow to mixing words. She used it. I'm not a fan of the school board member. She used it in reference to other school board members in their policies, so not against any student. But I'm not a fan of hers. But if I were her, I wouldn't have even apologized. I don't think she did anything wrong.
All right, we differ on that one. She definitely did something wrong. All right, so you'll see that in this group, like we all vary on the political on our spectrum. I'm more of the moderate, the centrist. I think it should not have been there. I think as a guardian ad litem, she should have known better. And I think I think that she should not have used. Well, you also discuss. We'll talk about this. She's also known for having associations with some of the local leftist activists in our area that run cover for her. This one being for public education, that apologized on behalf for able-bodied white women, apologizing on behalf of the entire special needs community, saying we don't need to have her censored because that's the death sentence. I'm like, really? An official statement rebuke saying that was inappropriate. So that was.
Well, I think it is interesting, the hypocrisy, right? If she's one of these leftist activists that want to suppress any type of speech, want to cancel all these people, and then she's the one out here using derogatory language like that. It's kind of it just shows the status that they have.
Are they community participation? They got it. Are they into it right now?
They are. Okay.
Yes.
They just got into it. Oh,
I got it.
Yes.
I got it.
Who is this?
Climate change was rarely mentioned in elementary school. Even in middle school, for most of my friends, climate change wasn't taught at all. And if it was, not in depth, let alone as the most pressing issue of our time. The VDOE states that students need foundational knowledge gained in elementary schools to have an initial understanding of climate change, and even in social studies units about democracy and rights. But climate change is very
Are you guys losing audio?
Many other injustices like
I do not know what's happening. I'm going to try to fix it.
To take action on this crisis, and all the youth-led organizations that exist today, and the FCPS climate goals. I urge you to make climate change a mandatory curriculum in at least grades 5 through high school, and to strongly encourage elementary schools to incorporate environmental issues in their learning, because this isn't just another problem. This will affect the very way we live. A school is for teaching children, and Fairfax County, as a prominent school system, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is student number 2.
Why don't they read out the students' names?
Thank you for allowing me.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Like after they put the cameras in the front, we're all speaking out in favor of or against the model trans policies that Governor Youngkin recently passed. So when they were saying, when all of these young children were saying what the school board wanted them to say, they were putting their cameras on their face, but they're anonymous completely.
Voted to move forward with the solar contracts, but as of
now,
no solar has been installed in FCPS schools through this program. Some schools like ours have funded their own small-scale solar projects through grants and fundraising. However, if we are to offset our carbon footprint, it will require full-scale solar on schools, starting with Annandale High School.
No, it won't. Hey, we can't hear you. I can.
I was muted. So this goes back into where the Pride Liberation Project was exposed for actually manipulating the talking points for the student speeches during our October 6th meeting in favor and against Governor Youngkin's transgender policies, where they would actually show and feature the children's faces prominently, displaying their name as well as other adult activists. Of course, our school board is, I think you can tell, they're not very popular within Fairfax County right now, and they're very sensitive to criticism, where they'll reduce like speaking time from 3 minutes to 2 minutes, and they will have the speakers from the back and behind and at a far angle, so you really can't see who they are. Hope I captured everything. I know we captured it early.
I'm sure these kids got their talking points probably from their Fairfax teachers.
Oh, probably from the teachers, yes. But they weren't being manipulated.
I took my kids to the Museum of Natural History probably about a month ago, or 6 weeks ago, and one of the things, well, it indoctrinated them into the climate change, right? I pointed out, at least they have some graphs that show for the vast majority of the last 1 billion years, the last 20% of Earth's existence, there's been no ice at either pole, right? In the time of the dinosaurs, or all that time when there was more life on Earth than there is now, no ice. But yet, apparently all life is going to end. You know.
Today, I'm urging the board to implement strong measures to protect the right of collective bargaining for our educators in Fairfax County.
They're working on a collective bargaining agreement right now, and if you notice, almost all the speakers are talking about collective bargaining because, you know, the unions are trying to get them up in front, but Mark Spooner runs a blog, Sarah, in our county called the Fairfax Monitor. And he FOIA'd because he said we should have a right to see what's happening behind the scenes before they just vote on it, like what's happening with negotiations. So he FOIA'd it, and they said, well, you know, we would just love to share that with you, except now we're going to charge $1,000 for it. So this is what they do here also with the FOIAs. Like if you want any information that you should have access to as a taxpayer, like what's happening with this collective bargaining agreement, we want to know about the negotiations and the process before this is voted on. They say we would just love that with you, but there's a lot of printing involved in those documents, so it's going to be $4,000 for you to find out.
Inflation is happening, so not the cheapest place to live.
They're not very transparent. They're not known for transparency here. But all of these people have their talking points straight from the union.
It's going to take unions to save it.
Oh yeah, I can imagine that. The unions are everything right now, and they are. I think they're fearful right now. They're losing their grasp on power. And a lot of this stuff doesn't help. But a FOIA request should never cost a taxpayer any money. And honestly, why can't you just send it digitally?
Instead of worrying about food, rent.
You make a good point. Our school board members have made pleas to say they're being harassed by FOIA requests.
There's a crucial need for
They try to paint themselves as a victim when they get FOIA'd.
And not only that,
yeah, I have not dealt too much with school boards in this regard. I just know, that seems to, again, I think that's a pattern I'm starting to hear more and more as I'm talking to more and more people. If you guys, like I said, I'm going up to Rhode Island, and the event I'm speaking at is with Nicole Salas, who was sued by her school board for filing too many FOIA requests. And then they tried to eliminate, so I guess this week, actually, they tried to dismiss their own charges, like pull their own case against her. And then the court said, no, we're going to go through with this now. You brought us here, we're going to go through with the court data. So now all the discovery is going to come out. So it's going to be good.
We have somebody who will show up later.
This language follows an oppressor-oppressed narrative.
It often depends on the local judge. When Loudon asked like 10 times for the same document, they said no data exists. And then I was working at the Pentagon and asked my coworker to issue the same FOIA request.
Guys, I think we should, I don't know if you're not hearing the audio, we should listen to this comment a moment, please.
Included and given relevant and appropriate information and terminology in FLE. That can be accomplished without adding confusing language to FLE that conflates gender and sex. Additionally, as a firm believer in equity of opportunity, I have concerns that the equity grading system is not working as intended. This isn't surprising because an equitable intervention or system should be designed so resources or benefits flow in the direction of those in need. Applying the same equity framework to all children is not equity. One outcome of this policy is grade inflation. Grades no longer reflect mastery of content. Under the new grading system, student grades are higher, but students have actually learned more. Good grades are an illusion that masks the real problem because when everyone's grades are increased by the same measure, the same students coming in last are still in last. When grades are inflated, students can enroll in courses for which they're not prepared. According to teachers, the only option is adjust or water down the curriculum. This is a massive disservice to all students. Not only does it deprive students of a rigorous education, it sends a message that in order for certain students to succeed, the bar must be lowered. That is not the case. FCPS must actively work to boost these children up to increased educational opportunities so they can fulfill their maximum potential. FCPS should not lower the bar. They should lift students up to it. I urge you to re-examine the equity grading framework and to include teachers from all disciplines in the discussion to ensure it will not perpetuate social injustices by masking the problem rather than addressing them.
That is equity.
Oh, here we go.
All right, let's give a listen.
I am Robert Rigby, Vice President for Advocacy of the Fairfax County Council PTA. Anna King, the President of the National PTA, has some sage words about the drop in test scores nationally. She says, research shows that when families are engaged and families and schools work together, students have better outcomes across all measures. Family-school partnerships also help schools. Parents, guardians, and other caregivers must be key partners in their children's educational success now more than ever. National PTA urges parents to get a better understanding of what their child is expected to learn at their grade level and where their child is academically. They should talk to the teacher about what the teacher notices regarding the child's learning. And they should provide their child's teacher in school with information about how their child is doing and the stressors in the child's life. PTA urges teachers to provide families with information on how their children are doing at school, the learning goals for the year, and what the grade level expectations are. Schools should also engage families in transparent and productive ways and ensure their voices are at the table for policy and funding decisions. Locally, FCCPTA sees that our school system is doing more and more family and community outreach, and we applaud it. Family-school partnerships can be our North Star. I also want to note the prioritization of hiring more mental wellness and health professionals in the legislative program. I also urge increased accessibility to such health and emotional wellness for disabled Black POC
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sean Kurth.
So we point out that the Fairfax PTAs are anti-parent, and they colluded with the Virginia PTA to
Sean Kurth.
Forced Harry to resign as the first and only Black PTA president of Thomas Jefferson High School. So we would be remiss if we didn't get that information out.
Our next speaker is Jennifer Litton-Tidd.
That's what I was going to say. All across the country, everybody hates parents, but they were talking about
definitely want to hear this one.
I thought they didn't want parents involved.
We want to hear this one. Definitely.
I got it.
We've been begging people for 25 years not to use the R slur. Using disability hate speech is a choice. So is this board's decision to do nothing. So I'm here to talk to children most impacted by this cruel choice not to act. To every neurodivergent child in FCPS, we see you and justify your pain. The R slur with which too many of you are smeared daily at school is not acceptable ever. I'm sorry truth tellers who think you matter are being maligned. I'm sorry that your pain isn't worthy of action. I'm sorry to those of you who've been subjected to restraint and seclusion, that you continue being dehumanized by behaviorism, that you are suspended and expelled at far higher rates. I'm sorry that you have been routinely denied services and supports that deny you your right to access education, that you're criminalized, that SIS reports for discipline look like rap sheets for kids. I'm sorry for SB 36, for the school to prison pipeline. I'm sorry the majority of non-speakers receive negligible communication supports and that too many of you can't read or struggle to read. I'm dyslexic. I know how much that hurts. I'm sorry that discussions on equity don't include you, that talks of diversity exclude you, and that far too many of you are denied an inclusion education. The choice to not act on this was a choice to further marginalize every intellectually and developmentally disabled child in FCPS and to embolden their bullies. All of you are beautiful and worthy of dignity and protection. I'm sorry we have failed you when you deserve better. Spread the word to end the word.
Wow, she spoke
Thank
against
you.
her tribe.
Our next speaker is Forrest Brown.
So they did miss one speaker didn't show up, so I'll definitely head it on there in a second.
Okay.
Good evening, school board. My name is Forrest Brown, and I'm here to speak in favor of collective bargaining. I had the great privilege of attending FCPS schools from kindergarten all the way through my graduation from high school. I attended 4 FCPS schools and worked in a 5th during the 2021 and 2022 school years as a monitor and as a COVID case manager. While working in FCPS in the midst of the pandemic and the transition back to in-person learning, it became clear that our schools are losing educators at an unsustainable rate, exacerbating the difficulties in helping students recover from the well-documented learning loss they have suffered during the last 2.5 years. Collective bargaining is critical because it is the only way to stem this loss of critical personnel from our schools and community.
There is
The
no
failure to
critical loss
maintain
of
adequate
person.
staffing levels in all relevant educator positions compromises the quality of education that FCPS is able to provide its students. The COVID-19 pandemic has precipitated a profound, multifaceted crisis in American education. The only way to prevent this crisis from spiraling into a generational catastrophe is to empower Fairfax County educators. Without a seat at the table and a voice in the discussion, we will continue to experience a debilitating exodus of faculty and support staff from our schools, to the detriment
Like the
of
900
students,
that we just lost
families,
last year, not
remaining
from this,
educators,
not because of
Not
lack
from
of
this.
collective bargaining.
Fairfax County Public Schools.
Not because they couldn't
must
discipline
have
children in the
collective
classroom, not because they're only getting paid 11 months out of the year.
Thank you. Our
Not
next
because there's
speaker
not-
is Angie Treratola.
There's not a shortage of teachers. If we simply had the same staffing ratios we had around 2000, we could lay off 20% of the current teachers and still staff all of the classrooms.
Good evening, Dr. Reed and members of the school board. My name is Angie Chiritola, and I'm here tonight to speak in favor of collective bargaining for your employees who are my neighbors and friends. I teach in a neighboring district, so I know the fear of retaliation all too well. I speak to you tonight as a parent, a taxpayer, and voter of the Springfield district. I'm here to ask my elected officials and the staff they hired, what is their plan to give my son and his friends the best education possible? This means giving your staff a seat at the table. Some are afraid of what collective bargaining could cost FCPS, but instead we need to talk about the unseen cost of delaying a collective bargaining resolution, the incalculable loss of highly qualified educators, our human capital to other districts and professions. Effective educators and ESPs require training. No training is more effective than the power of on-the-job experience. There's no training that Pearson or any other corporation can package and deliver that will instantly provide 5, 10, 15, 20 years of experience to a new employee. The reality is veteran educators silently carry the burden of training, supporting, and mentoring new employees outside of contract hours. What causes the instructional and operational staff to leave the largest county in Virginia? They're tired of not making enough to afford to be able to live in Fairfax County because the cost of living has increased faster than the wages have. They're tired of being asked to do more for less. You have a very simple solution. Pass a meaningful collective bargaining resolution that is transparent. Bring everyone to the table. Make these negotiations public so all stakeholders are aware of what collective bargaining can and can't do for our educators. Stop discussing it behind closed doors. If you do not do this, you will have more vacancies next year. We are asking this county to give their educators a voice. If it's the legislators, let's work together to make these changes possible, or they will leave you to the district that gave it to them last week.
Thank you. Our next speaker.
He said was a lie.
Our next speaker is David Walrod.
Will go and support
overwhelming evidence
more
shows
inflation.
that. Yeah, overwhelming shows that after 3 years, teacher effectiveness does not increase.
Chair Sizemore Heiser, Dr. Reed, and members of the board. Thank you for
well, they could save a lot of money if they stopped hiring all these admin
the remainder of my time
positions.
Will be spent reading direct quotes from the
you know, when they get increases, they don't increase
meeting,
teachers' pay, they increase admin positions.
That's what they've been doing in Fairfax.
I will email this full document to the board.
So there was a statement that teachers can't afford to live here. But that's false, right? What they don't include is they get 17% of their salary is paid into a pension fund outside of their salary, right? So it's typically called deferred compensation for Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or anybody else, but they don't like to do that. They like to hide their salary. Two step one teachers earn over $140,000, which is higher than the median household income. So let me repeat. If you come out of college with a master's degree and more than half do, you start, you earn more in that household than the average or than the median household income in Fairfax. So to say that teachers can't afford to live in Loudon is a bald-faced lie. It's knowingly false, and it's repeated over and over and over again by these socialist teachers union advocates.
Well, that's the thing is they keep voting for more inflation. I mean, their teachers unions are overwhelmingly Democrat, and Democrats are the reason why we have such high inflation right now. It's the reason why their compensation hasn't kept up with inflation rates.
But in Loudon, it actually has greatly surpassed inflation rates, right? So we're just the district right beside. I don't have Fairfax's numbers, but over about a 5 or 6 year period, without any collective bargaining, teachers received over 40% raises over 5 years. Now, I know no industry that gets remotely close to 8% annual raises, yet they got them without any strikes, without any unions. So here in Northern Virginia, teachers are very well paid.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Jake
What's what happens with private schools too. So private school teachers tend to make more because they're competing every day and they're able to negotiate their own salaries and, you know, negotiate for themselves and not have to worry about the overhead that comes with being in a union.
Move here because the school system is one of the best in the country, and that their kids, regardless of where they grew up in the past, here in Fairfax County, they know that their kids have a real shot at a future. They have a real future, you know, to look forward to. And the education system here is top notch. And I don't understand how we could keep a balance of having a great community and a great school system without the student or the teachers having a voice through collective bargaining to help ensure that everybody has everything they need.
Students won't get a voice through collective bargaining. In fact, students don't have a choice. Now, when they put out this strategic plan survey, they're not asking, what do you prioritize, academics or ideology, teaching, and all this stuff.
Our next speaker is
Students never get a
Hong.
voice.
Daniel Hong.
So if Fairfax County would take the state and local funding and give it to every family, they could afford to give families $23,000 per kid and say use it either on us or somewhere else. They refuse to do it.
Oh, they should not be allowing this.
Support of collective bargaining. As a former student of FCPS and a resident of Providence District,
They specifically do not allow multiple people to show up to the dais.
I had the privilege of having so many awesome educators in this district, and I'm glad that I met them. Would the experiences be the same for students that come after me if all my experienced educators leave? I want them to have...
Yeah, Harry, didn't you say, I'm not as familiar with Fairfax, but didn't you say that Fairfax has no trade school, no vocational school, where they teach you to be a mechanic or a nurse?
No, they have
they're talking about a
academies.
great school system, right? Only about a third of Americans, graduate from college, and a lot of the jobs don't need that. They don't have any vocational school whatsoever, and they're claiming
No,
it's
they have academies that provide basic services, and they had a planning meeting where they're under capacity. They don't have a capacity to meet demand.
Our next speaker is Stephanie Lunquist-Arora.
Thanks for the opportunity to share my views with you today. With each meeting, we the parents, your constituents, are left wondering if you're listening to us. Just this week, I emailed 3 of you to find out why the open meeting on Tuesday was canceled. No response yet. I thought it was especially honest of you when you didn't even pretend to care about our views during the last meeting. You pitched the critical race theory resolution, ironically called something like the Truth in Education resolution, before community participation. I guess you didn't really feel the need to pretend you cared what we thought in that meeting. It was obviously controversial given that the resolution was gutted and the rhetoric was replaced, but you didn't want to listen to us beforehand. Not very inclusive of you. Today, as you discuss spending, I'm guessing you will continue to ignore parental pleas for more focus on academic excellence. In fact, that topic doesn't even seem to come up in your meetings. If you would at least try to think about and prioritize learning loss and plummeting test scores in spite of equity grading, we'd appreciate it. Also, since it's open period for comments now on the proposed changes to the family life education curriculum, I'd like to say, are you kidding me? Co-ed sex education and a gender transitioning unit in elementary school are not appropriate. Putting boys and girls together in a class to learn about sensitive topics shows that you don't really care about the comfort of the vast majority of FCPS students. And pushing a gender transitioning unit beginning in 4th grade is just one example of FCPS dysfunction that makes national news. 4th graders should be learning long division, not how to medically transition. Please use common sense and vote no on these proposed changes. For those of you watching now, if you'd like more in-depth coverage of these topics in simultaneous live stream, please tune into the shadow board at usanow.tv, usanow.tv. Thank you very much.
Please,
Thank
please
you.
keep your voice down. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is
Were they yelling? What were they yelling?
They're yelling boo.
They were yelling boo, boo, boo.
Should have told them to control your minions.
I wish Karen was here, but if Karen was here, I would address her and say, I actually am probably in the minority here that doesn't believe that she should, after calls for resigning. And
Karen Keys-Gamarra isn't even there.
Set that standard, then we should have asked.
She's not there today?
She's not there.
Hold on. Let's hear this lady out.
Melanie to resign and be censured for her remarks about Asian heritage because she went to Benihana's. But I can definitely give you a reason why you should probably.
Did she resign?
And you all need to resign because of the deplorable decline in education.
Who is
we
this?
We have a nation's report card that just came out, and Virginia lost 10 points in math, and 10 and 11 points in math and reading. Where's the apology for any of that? Where's the apology that what you have done to kids because you decided to keep schools closed and you gaslit all of us parents who tried to raise the alarm bells about what was happening during virtual learning? Where's the apology for any of that? Where is the taking ownership for that? At least Karen took ownership and responsibility for her remarks. At least she owned up to it. None of you have owned up to it. And let me also just point out, I am the one that did this. I am the one that sat through 53 hours of these school board meetings, and you never once talk about academic learning. You never once talk about learning loss. You never once try to address it. And your solution is tutor.com, which is a disaster because only 1.6% of the students are even using it. But let's also talk about one thing you do talk about on here, school safety, which you talk about in terms of gun violence, because we got a virtue signal about gun violence, right? But let's talk about what's happened over in school safety. We had a stabbing at Mount Vernon High School. Last year at West Potomac, we had a kid die in our school over drug overdose. We had a kid die because they committed suicide. What about violence like that? Why aren't we addressing those issues? Stop with the virtue signaling. Get to work on academics and real school safety.
Thank you. We also have 3 video submissions. Our first is from Harry Jackson.
Hello, citizens of Fairfax. Thank you for having me join you tonight and talk about the topic of criticism, or the lack thereof that the school board is willing to tolerate. We saw that on October 6th that they were willing to have the cameras prominently display the faces of those speakers that were before the board speaking in favor of a policy. Yet in the next meeting, on the 20th of October, they reverted the cameras right back to the back of the heads of speakers that were critical of some of their positions and other positions. Yet on the 18th of October, they mentioned, well, we need to engage the community. Well, here's a platform. As I'm speaking to you now, we're actually streaming the school board meeting live, and you can join us on the shadow board. And you can sign in and you can have your voice heard. You are not limited to simply 2 minutes to speak on any topic.
Please keep your voices
Hopefully
down.
this will help the school board engage with its participant community. In fact, we invite our members of the school board to join us. Thank you.
Our next video is submitted by Leslie
My
Houston.
fans.
Our very own.
Our very own fans.
Good evening. I am Leslie Houston, President of Fairfax Education Association, a union representing thousands of your employees.
Keeping schools closed.
Keeping schools
I
closed.
cannot believe that they took your submission, Harry. I got to give it to them. That's community engagement, I got to tell you.
Controversial issues that are impacting teachers, and FCPS continues to send the message that they are backing away from this important and necessary work. What happened to the board, who was committed to anti-racism and anti-bias education that imparts the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that lead to prejudice, reduction, and collective action for a more just world? Educators were optimistic and thought we, together, would move the needle when it came to the promises of anti-bias and anti-racism. Instead, we are witnessing a board who are not focused on the main things: the kids, the educators, and the staff. On Thursday, October 21st, the spirit of educators was broken when you watered down the Teach Truth in Education resolution.
So she doesn't consider academic
you will have an
progress as being
opportunity
the
to
main
redeem
thing. Let's go into
yourselves
that.
when it is
The
time
leader
to pass a strong
of the
collective bargaining
teachers union
resolution.
doesn't think academic
When that
progress is a main
resolution
thing.
comes to this board, I encourage you to remember the educators and staff
It's
who
not
supported
surprising.
you
I'm
during
just
the
surprised
pandemic,
she's admitting it.
who stood
Yeah.
by you when your constituents called for your resignations, who helped to elect you because they believed you would make a difference. Bring this strong resolution to the public and pass collective bargaining. This is a crucial time in Fairfax County Public Schools, and your leadership is needed now more than ever. The ball is in your court. Thank you.
She doesn't care that student
Our
scores
final
drop.
video
She doesn't care
submitted
that
by
minority
Shelley Arnoldi.
scores drop even further during COVID and this. She just doesn't care about kids.
My name is Shelley Arnoldi, and this is the 5th time I've spoken at a school board meeting since January of this year, and I hope this will be the one that earns a response. I'm going to start with a true story from a parent of a 3rd grader attending Waynewood Elementary School. In the first few weeks of this year, my friend reported that a boy had been harassing her daughter, calling her names, using profanity, kicking her multiple times in the stomach and legs, tripping her, and even stabbing her in the arm with a pencil which drew blood. The school's response was to separate the children, pull the victim out of line if she found herself near the boy, and offer her counseling. The mother asked if the boy would be punished for bullying, and she was told no, because there was no imbalance of power. These are 8-year-olds. Your policy is a disgrace. Today, I am speaking on behalf of a newly formed chapter of Moms for Liberty. Moms for Liberty is a nonprofit organization that welcomes anyone with a desire to stand up for parental rights. The founders are former school board members who are committed to unifying, educating, and empowering parents to defend their parental rights. The primary goal is to engage our communities and elected leaders on key issues impacting our families. And one of our founding missions is to hold elected officials accountable at all levels of government. We believe it's important to hire educators who will teach our children core subjects such as math, science, English, and accurate U.S. history. We value school sports that provide students fair and safe competition. We also believe the best path forward is one built on meaningful in-person communication, which is sorely lacking in Fairfax County. Last week, I attended one of the superintendent's community conversations, and there were less than 25 parents in attendance, which besides the school and teachers and staff. We badly need actual community forums and town halls where parents are properly notified and community members understand what's happening. Our group hopes to engage parents and facilitate participation so you can receive critical feedback. We look forward to working with all of you to ensure we're raising one of the best educated generations of children in the nation. That's a win for everyone involved, especially Fairfax County.
Go Shelley.
Right. Agenda item 4.02, strategic plan update. I call on Dr. Reed for an update on the strategic plan and on academic matters.
Oh, this is horrible. So this is the one where I was at the work session meeting where they discussed this. They didn't even know what a plan was. Can you imagine that? And then their plan that was presented was what a plan is and why a plan is necessary. These are the people, 12 people that just voted unanimously, was just released in Fairfax County Times. They couldn't have the votes to censor Karen Keyes-Gamarra for an ableist slur. But yeah, their idea.
Thank you, Bev. Are you queuing? Thank you, Laura.
Do we really
Actually, Harry, if I recall, they had a whole slide in their presentation dedicated to why a plan was necessary.
Why a plan was
Laura,
needed.
let's go ahead. One of the things I want to share with you is that we are opening our student survey window, and a special thanks to our student school board member, Michelle Todd.
Yeah. Sarah, I have to ask you, are you enjoying yourself?
This is interesting.
It's interesting.
Thank you. We aim to please.
Their idea to have a plan is to have a survey for other people to tell them how to have a plan.
Strategic planning work. The survey
elected
is
officials.
To measure student perceptions and elicit.
So I actually looked at this survey they're administering to the children, and apparently parents had the opportunity to opt. Did you get that email, Harry? I didn't see an email to opt out of. Okay, I missed that one. So, I mean, my kids know to not take any surveys because they always ask them ridiculous questions, and I tell my kids unless it's an academic question, don't answer them, right? Like you don't need to give them information. But so I didn't opt them out, but they're not taking it anyways. But one question's in there, which I thought was really timely. Question number 14. Okay, so they ask you a series of things, and they say to assess climate of the school. And one of them is, so they say the following are major problems at my school, and you either like strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. So number 14 is discrimination and or harassment against people of their mental and or physical disability. And I was thinking, did they mean when the school board does it? Like when the school board makes them comfortable? That's not, I don't think that that's included in the school climate, but I did think that that was a fascinating question on that.
I thought that was interesting. It's okay when they do it.
Yes, it's
that's an
okay
SEL question. It's a standard question on the SEL questionnaires.
Yes. Well, interesting you mentioned. Yes. Yeah, interesting you mentioned that because they have in their plan a contract. I think. Oh my gosh, it's on the tip of my tongue. Literally run by like 4 people. Panorama was one, but even the ESSER
Panorama
funds.
So Panorama is a Zuckerberg initiative actually to create an app for your phone that a teacher can basically give a student when they do something good, give them a praise for it on the app, and then they can also report incident reports in real time, and that is basically creating the social credit score that will follow them through school.
You said it's a Zuckerberg initiative?
Wow.
Yeah, so Zuckerberg is creating this app.
You might turn it down.
It's connected with Kessel, and Kessel is CASEL, and that is Zuckerberg, that's Gates, that's there's a whole number of people that sponsor Kessel, which is the whole basically pushing out there the whole SEL initiatives for all the schools across the country. I did an article in Human Events like last month about all this. It's really fascinating.
Harry, we need to do a special on Education Matters on this. And
this is one of the tools.
Thank you, Sarah.
This is one of the tools that they're using to support their bias incident reporting initiatives to identify trends. One, they use SEL data to identify trends and perceptions within the school, so they can shape their minds. So Sarah, I've got a background in this as well. So, but it is a concern, particularly when you look at like how they even treat securing the data log retention, which they don't even address. So I mean, like, yes, I tell my children, do not participate in the surveys.
Yeah,
I mean, the whole strategic plan is a fraud because they hire outside consultants to write it. So it's basically already been written. And this is just a pro forma exercise to make the public think they have input, right? I mean, if you ask the public to rank, in your priorities, which of the following is your goal? To make sure teachers get the highest pay, to teach us the ideology of a certain political party, to do all these other things, or academics. Every single student and parent would rank academics first, right? But yet you'll see when the plan comes out, it's very sparse on measurable academic goals. I think we've talked before about Prince William. Another neighboring county has very specific, measurable, and aspirational academic goals in their plan. And Fairfax would do well to look at that. But this school board, it looks like, is going to try to water down everything and talk about non-issues in there.
Well, because academics are not equity focused. So that's the thing with like SEL, and now Learning 2025 is the next one that's coming out too. That's even goes a step further than SEL, and they're not equity focused. And so now they're starting to say that your EQ score is more important than your IQ score when it comes to how well you'll do as an adult in your profession. And then it goes into like ESG scores for companies. It's all relative, and it's all leading into that.
Interesting that they have a strategic plan update within just a month. We've had a lot of, do we want to follow along? I mean, we already know that they've already performed this. So, wow. Does anyone want to talk about some of the school board talks that we saw earlier?
But it does say Superintendent Reed's going to talk about academic matters next. So if she does give an update on academics, maybe we can zone in for them. But
all right, fine. Okay, let's talk about it. She'll say something about social justice
on her slide. She says in comparison to one of the slides that in comparison to the rest of Virginia, Fairfax is catching up to pre-pandemic levels more quickly than other people in Virginia. So she's going to say, I think, because that's on one of her slides. And then we've changed, Sarah, just like around a lot of the country, we've changed standards of grading here in Fairfax County to reflect what we want to reflect. So we give kids automatic 50% and let them do assignments multiple times and take tests multiple times. So so there's that. And it's interesting, the statistics that they use, because even though we're still down 12% in math on the standards of learnings exams, they want to talk about where we are in terms of like the rest of Virginia or the edges, and then they're like, but we are catching up. We are. So I think that they put that line in there just to try to address something academic. I don't know, maybe they'll start listening. It doesn't really feel that way, but at least we got a line in a slide. So that's the main thing. The main thing.
Oh, this is your favorite. This is one of your favorite school board members. One of our favorite segregationists in Fairfax County. She like in her district. She
Where's her
loves
mask?
to keep. Yeah, where's her mask? She wears a mask. So a little bit of background. She's the representative from Mount Vernon, and she literally keeps the two high schools, Mount Vernon High School and West Springfield, like literally segregated. They're very close together. Mount Vernon is mostly minority, under capacity. West Springfield is over capacity, and she'll spend over $70 million or advocate for that to be spent at the high school to keep it white. And then we have like
wasn't it Lewis?
I don't know. I think
she took
yeah,
it
Lewis.
I think she took that. Yeah.
Yeah, she took it from Lewis as well. And she has two middle schools, Sandburg and Whitman. And Whitman Middle School isn't even located within its physical boundary and zone. But it just like they gerrymander basically all this little pocket of poverty, and they ship all the kids to this one school. And like the neighborhood school is just a few miles down the road. Sandburg is not. Yeah, that's the school for the people that live in that neighborhood. But they'll bus all the poor people into Whitman. And then so that's the school board member for you.
Oh, wow.
Keeping West Springfield white.
Keeping West Springfield white, yes. So I had the opportunity to be at one of the community engagement centers that our superintendent hosted over at Langley. I answered some very interesting questions. There was a survey. You might have recognized this, Sarah, from SCL. To teach Spanish, the Spanish teacher felt it necessary to ask incoming freshmen, their sexual orientation, their sexual preferences, because that was necessary. That was necessary in order to learn Spanish 1. Yes. And I asked that question.
Well, you have to know. You have to know, right? Because Spanish has different sexes based on who you're talking to, right? So you use an A or an O.
It's a romance language, right?
Exactly.
It's a romance language, right? She couldn't answer that question. One thing that she did mention that was promising is that they want to have Algebra 1 as the baseline for 8th graders, which was the only thing I heard promising. What was really concerning was her focus on a social justice approach to education. And what we're struggling with in Fairfax is a reduction in opportunities for children to take advanced academics, because she'll say with a straight face, well, our data shows that minorities are, at disproportionate levels aren't enrolled in these courses. And you're like, do you wonder why? You literally segregate the schools in Mount Vernon. Like, we literally deal with segregation in our middle school pipeline. I mean, and you don't fund after school programs. Like those after school enrichment activities are entirely dependent on boosters and parents from funding those programs. So if you put all parents who are just impoverished or single parent households, you're not going to have that, which is causing that systemic problem. This next school board member, she's an interesting character as well. She will say literally in a meeting, and you'll see, if you watch this in our work session meetings and in our school board meetings, you'll have a horrible idea presented. She will never vote against a proposal. She'll just say, this is a really bad idea, but I'm going to vote for it anyway. We've seen that time and time again. And she just had that look at her
Sarah,
face.
There was one meeting where they were trying to change the code of conduct, and it was for compelled speech. Like they were, well, a couple things. They were mandating pronoun use at risk of suspension all the way down to like 4th grade or something like that if you didn't use preferred pronouns. And so then the other big change in that same code of conduct amendment was to away for the day with the phones. And all of the parents who got up were speaking out against the compelled speech, the pronoun thing, because they said that's compelled speech. It's a constitutional violation. And so she's like, I've heard the parents, and I think that we have a lot more work to do on this. And it was like all of the got up to speak, like all 10 of us. I think I don't remember if I was speaking at that meeting. Everybody got up and said no to this. She's like, I really understand. I hear the parents. This needs a lot of work. So I vote in favor of these changes every single time. Like she's notorious for that.
Wow. Yeah, there was a case, if I'm not mistaken, it has been, the latest case says that, you can't fire a teacher for misgendering a student. Because you're right, it's compelled speech, it's a constitutional violation. And as a public school teacher, the school falls under the First Amendment.
Yeah, you would think so. I think a lot of litigation right now. I know one Ohio teacher was awarded like $400,000 wrongful termination. I think I'm not sure at what level that is. So I know that because it might all be at the state level right now. So, but we're facing in Virginia still, because that's actually Governor Youngkin passed the model policies and said it's not mandate. We're not mandating pronouns for teachers or for students. And so the school board got up and made an announcement like in the last board meeting or the one before that said we're not listening to that. And they do that. I mean, with regardless of whether they did it with masks, they just kind of choose which state laws they want to follow, and then it all comes out. Like it all gets it's all litigation. So their legal fees over the course of I think 3 years were like $16 million because they act like.
So that's where the money to pay teachers, right?
Yes, that's a great. If they just didn't have to go to court so much, they could pay teachers more. Like if they just followed the law.
They didn't have to go to court.
And all of their clothes are always just, we need to consult with our lawyers about this other crazy thing that we're doing, which is pretty illegal, but we're trying to figure out a way around it by paying.
Guys, let me jump in here real quick. How does the audio sound on your end? I made some adjustments so it can play in the background, but it's not as obtrusive. And if you all just stop talking, like at any given time, you and the audience should be able to hear it. It should be audible. They may need to turn their speakers up a little bit, but tell me how that sounds on your end at this level and the way I have it set now.
I think we can have a conversation and talk and continue just having a discussion. I think it's pretty good. What do you all think?
I think he's asking, can we hear?
Not distracting. I can hear.
Well, I think if we stop.
And then a team that is working with Mutu Kabai to plan our journey from now until the 1st of June. As we've intended the board in our first business meeting in June, we're hopeful that we will be able to.
Can you hear that okay?
Oh yeah, I can hear it. Yeah,
when you're not talking,
I can hear it.
And when you are talking, is it distracting?
No, I think you hit the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks, Dan.
All right. Hey, no problem. I appreciate you guys working with me on this tonight. I'm going to jet for a bit. Harry, if you need me, you know how to reach me.
Great. So what we're going to do in the shadow board when we have our superintendent, because she's very, very smooth. It's a very smooth talker. We have to play the PG version. We're going to call buzzword bingo. Create our buzzwords. We created a chart earlier. I had it at the community forum. It was a blast. A lot of the parents loved it. We all yelled bingo when we heard the same thing, because you'd ask a question, she'd go right to the buzzwords. Like we're just going to have social justice. We're going to have equity, equal outcomes, and really nothing of substance. But I am concerned about the social justice approach. I mean, we saw what happened at Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology, where they would, instead of fixing K-12 education, they would decide to just simply scapegoat Asians. and reduce academic rigor and merit at the school, which bothers bothers all of us as parents. And then we saw the equity
And
grading.
it's remedial math.
That remedial math. That's right. They wanted to do away with advanced mathematics altogether. VMPI, for Virginia Mathematics Pathway Initiative. This was under the previous governor's administration, Governor Northam. They wanted to prevent students from being able to take advanced mathematics until 11th grade. So no advanced math. The highest you could probably maybe matriculate up to would be calculus by your senior year. So they wanted to force an equal outcome across the board. And this is like Fairfax, where you have kids who literally take calculus in 8th grade. A good number, or a number that are taken.
Do they at least allow them to take college courses?
I didn't think they wanted to provide that opportunities for them as well. I mean, they currently do. Right now, if you can't go get into Thomas Jefferson, you could take advanced math classes. If they have lab schools in certain other schools in the county, or take it at a community college that they'll pay for. But that's under threat.
Here's what happens.
That's under threat.
Here's what happens when you dumb down courses and give affirmative action. Abrar Ramesh was admitted to Yale, now lives in her parents' basement, can hardly say a coherent argument in any of these meetings. We should listen to what she has to say. To mock it.
Such a success, a Yale degree, you make $16,000 at school. That's your full-time job. And you would think you could do that right.
Are also not overlooked and have a voice in some way. So I just want us to be thoughtful about how we're even
Well, David Hogg got into Harvard, so I mean...
Community interest in folks who want to have a voice.
I mean, this is proof it's not where you go to school. This is proof right here. You know, this is proof, right? Someone says I went to Harvard, be like, listen, I'm not going to deal with the false sense of superiority. No, not today. No. Fairfax, no.
I know a lot of very dumb people that went to Harvard, so...
Just a couple of quick questions. Maybe you can tell us, I was recently going over the...
Oh, we got a mask.
We got a mask now. I think she sees the writing on the wall. She's not running for re-election.
We're hoping to get input from. Can you just talk a little bit about how...
She's in the district where likely someone who's conservative will likely win in the next race. It's probably going to get ugly in Dranesville.
So we are sending, and thank you, Ms. Tolan, we are sending invitations out to a variety of community groups, several hundred.
Oh, this is community participation. Do we know of anyone who got an invitation? Because I sure don't. I'm plugged into a lot of groups. You know, so I'll tell you what. I just got on my social, I'm getting people asking me, Sarah, get this. Did you know that our NAACP chapter is 90% white and woke? I'm sure they got an invitation. This is a group they're so detached from the Black community. They have their first in-person activity was paddleboarding, and their first in-person meeting was at literally, I kid you not, an Irish pub. I'm like, yeah, that's where you find all the Black people, paddleboarding in Irish pubs. And
didn't they call the police on the Black attendees?
They did. They did call the police when I showed up. I was with a few Black people there. They got scared. Scary Black man syndrome. The police were called on me. Nothing happened. And
it gets better. In attendance was the district attorney. He was in attendance to watch all this. Didn't say anything.
Yes, the district attorney or prosecutor was there. Watched this down. Did nothing. All I did was sit down. I walked in. Yeah.
Is it run by Rachel Dolezal?
Might as well be.
No.
Might as well be.
I was talking to somebody earlier today, and this is what it comes down to with a lot of these issues, and it's just liberal or progressive white women are crazy. They're the ones that have been told that they are so oppressed that they have to do something to make up for their oppression, right? And so they either transition their child so that they can be like, look how good of a parent I am, or they head up a NAACP chapter and white explain to you how you're oppressed.
Exactly, they'll do that. And as we saw with special needs for public education, talk on behalf of the needs of the special needs community, the special needs community.
And you can receive these lectures while you're paddleboarding. So
while you're paddleboarding.
But you'll never hear them
It's gonna be so funny.
academic growth.
No.
It's going to be so funny because I'm going to get protested next week, and because I'm speaking on trans topics, and they're going to be a bunch of white liberal women out there protesting me. It's going to be hilarious.
You know, I feel your pain, right? I mean, I had a bunch of white woke women protest me in the name of racial justice at Thomas Jefferson PTSA. I was the first black president. I guess I wasn't woke enough. Like, literally, my parents were like in the civil rights movement, and that I wasn't woke enough for them. So I was just like, they live in $1 million houses, and they wanted to vote out like the first black president. I mean, you can't. This is the times we live in.
Sarah, with regard to these people transitioning their children, have you seen the IWN series on identity crisis for children? Have you followed that at all?
I have
No.
not.
So they put out a docuseries of it's mostly very young women, and they had gone in for procedures, and some of them when they were minors, and it's like regret afterwards, and then they detransition. But anyways, like there's like especially with these young women, it was like they found this echo chamber among people when they were young, and who kind of edged them along in this journey, and they actually it's so sad. They talk about how they lose in the community that embraced them when they decided to detransition. They were saying that they were affirmed all this time, and then when they decided that that's not what they wanted to do, and they wanted to maybe have children or live as women, they lost all that support. Do you ever find that you lose some support in the trans community when you speak out against things like indoctrination in schools and stuff like that? I mean, I know that the white liberal women are protesting you, but are you also having a hard time in the trans community?
Oh yeah, it's 100%. Like I'm blocked by like all of the more famous trans people that have been in the news lately. Like if you've heard of Keffels or Eli Ehrlich or some of these others, they all basically have me blocked online because they don't want to. One second, my dog's going a little crazy.
Seeing no other questions on this part, Dr. Reed, I'll have you turn to the second part of your presentation on academic matters.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Yeah, so I definitely feel it, and I see it, but it is mostly the detrans community gets it very hard. And in Trans Against Groomers, we have detransitioners. Most of the detransitioners that you've heard of probably are in our movement. Chloe Cole's a good friend of mine, and I featured her in a article. I spoke about detransitioners and why we need to start listening to them. But it is very much like a cult mentality to where once you leave that cult, they hammer you to make the other sphere leaving. It's very much that Saul Alinsky rule number 12. They will pick a target, they'll isolate that target, and then personalize everything about them and make it very, very personal. But it's really anytime you step out of line, they think that they can just tell you, especially in the trans community, because they think that you're harming their cause, you're against them. So in my last piece that I wrote about the Dylan Mulvaney situation, it came out last Friday, I think. I even said, they will call me. I said in the article, they said they will call me self-hating just for writing this article, because I acknowledge biological realities, which they don't. You know, saying trans women are women is not acknowledging biological reality. Saying trans women are trans women does, because it acknowledges that I'm a male. And so just acknowledging that, and I said I think it's because a lot of them feel shame. They feel shame about who they are, so they have to try to force society to go along with that. And that, yeah, that gets me called. I've been called TERF. I've been called transphobic. I've been called self-hating. I've been called just about everything you can think of. I'm a trans medicalist because I believe you have to have gender dysphoria to be trans. Like, there's the number of things that the trans community will go after you for is a lot, because they think that you belong to them. You are part of their group, so you have to think exactly like they do, or you're going to be, you know, shunned out of the community, and they will try to, you know, cancel you for it. But they can't. I'm uncancelable.
That must be it. Still, I mean, I can imagine it's really difficult, because I feel like when you step out and you say your viewpoint, you're like, well, love friends, right? So you like find your people, and you really when you're out, kind of, you really know who your real friends are. We were just about this today, actually. So.
Resources and support. And I'm just inspired.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I don't think the general trans community is like what we're portrayed as. I think I always have this, it's like the 8% rule, where the 8% are the extremes, but they're the loudest, so they get the most attention. Because most trans people I know, at least transsexuals who transition, most are not speaking out because they live this stealth life, and they don't want the hassle, because they don't have to. They can stay who they are. They don't have to worry about what's going on. But I think right now what we're seeing is, I mean, since we started Trans Against Groomers, we have over 300 people that have already started to be like, hey, I'm trans, I want to be part of this organization. And we're not a big community, so when you start seeing that, it starts to be like, okay, there's a lot more people that don't believe in, you know, harming children. That's what we're looking at right now, and, you know, not wanting to medicalize children. That's the biggest thing that we're against.
Of our student body. In fact, I would say across the entire state of Virginia, we had about 3,500 students tested.
I'm just looking at this SOL pass rates.
Of students across the state or the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Is this where she talks about Fairfax in comparison to the rest of Virginia?
Yeah, we don't suck as we suck less than other places that are sucking. So that's her.
And let's talk about income per capita in Fairfax County in comparison to the rest of the state of Virginia.
Yeah.
Yes.
But let's take a look at Harry, take a look at the scores between the NAAP and SOL, right? So just in reading, the SOLs are the easiest standardized test of any state in the nation. It had like 72% pass the SOL, 36% pass the NAAP. And same thing like we already have dumbed down standards. And this lady wants to dumb them down even more.
Well, of course. I mean, you achieve equity that way.
Say, on the other hand, that we did have about close to 27,000 of our students tested, which is about 14% of all Virginia testers, which a total was 187,000. And you can see on the slide what the Virginia pass rate at 4th and 8th grade.
Look at the NEP proficiency rate. It's less than a third.
Having said that, we know that almost 80% for 4th and 8th graders in reading, and between 70 and 80% in math is still not where we want to be as a division. As a premier division, we have work
30%.
The pandemic. But I want to remind us that the 30%.
I'm happy to listen to her say that. We still have work to do. So I feel like now you put policies in place where you try to get that work done. So it's great that we're talking about it now.
As we think about that. And the second,
you know, and just look at like what their priorities are. They're talking about community engagement. They sent out, I remember I was in the work session meeting, you know, they sent out 450 invites. Of course, it's not going to any groups that we're aware of. And I'm like, how does that happen?
For example, which are an international assessment. The PISA
Or
scores actually look at 90 countries.
Tutor.com. How about that? Where they only had 1.6% of people actually use it. Oh, by the way, they took away the computers from low-income households that actually can't afford a computer. in order to use that service. So that's why you had such low numbers use actually tutor.com.
Over the summer, right? They took them away.
Yeah, over the summer.
She's posting PISA.
I'm really.
Did Fairfax take the PISA exam in 2018? Do y'all know? I'm going to FOIA that.
No, I didn't know.
I don't know.
Because I guarantee you that is misleading, what she posted there. The PISA is one of the best tests because it gets backgrounds on the demographics of the actual students that took it. And I guarantee you it'll be devastating if we can get that 2018 report.
Oh, that's worth FOIAing. It depends if they will charge you a few $1,000s for that. It takes a lot of money to print off a piece of paper. You know that's coming, Brian. You're gonna get.
Well, this one is already a report, so it's not like internal emails they have to review. But is that how do you FOIA? Is there Loudon has a portal? Do you just email them?
We do have a FOIA portal. Yes, we do. But they like to play a game where they only have one person that does all the FOIA requests.
One of the things I've heard while visiting elementary schools is that one of the things that's holding back the fidelity of implementation of all the work that we've been doing is the lack of approved instructional materials. And I know.
Oh, good. Oh, this is a good segue into the books they put in the libraries.
And then the Virginia Department of Education kind of stepped in and said we're going to work on a approved.
I thought he was going to say the one thing getting in the way of what we want to do in elementary school is the parents.
I am so glad that we have a co-founder of Trans Against Groomers because we have seen speaker after speaker after speaker. And I just need to know, like, oh my gosh, like, if you can't, why is it going to cause harm to the trans community to promote, to say, we need to talk to children at the earliest ages, kindergarten, about sex? Like, how does not talking about it, what their sexual preferences are, material says sexual preference pizza, like what they like to do, surveys for how many sexual partners they have starting in fourth grade, 6th grade, 8th grade, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll survey. And if we are against this, we're bigots. We're bigots. I mean, I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to be better as a person. I just need to know, like, how does it align to, like, harm to other people? If I say, I'm not for gender queer, I'm gonna make the blatant obvious ones, right? Gender queer, I'm not for it.
Yeah. It does,
your thought.
and it's not even. It has nothing to do even with the LGBT community at all, because, like, even some of these books that they have in the libraries, it's all about sexuality, which includes straight people. So it's like the parental choice bill in Florida. It excluded talking about children about straight sex too. So I don't understand. They are using our community as a shield to promote this stuff, and I don't understand how they think it's okay. Like, why do these people want to talk to other people's kids about sex so much? Like, that's a parent's responsibility to explain, all that stuff. I think any sex education, one, it should be opt-in, and two, it should go over biology, and that should be about it. There's no need to talk about sexuality or sexual orientation or gender identity and put these ideas in these kids' heads before they, and it's like you say, even before they even know what sex or sexuality is. Like, my friend Ariel, she's a lesbian, and she says it like this. She's like, I knew I was romantically interested in girls, but I didn't know what sex was until I was in puberty. So I wasn't, like, sexually attracted to girls until puberty, but before that, it's like there's a romantic interest. But you can have romantic interest to anybody, It's kind of like there's no need to talk about that type of stuff with children. And like you said, like I said before,
I agree with,
it puts an idea in their head. And these books are gross. I actually had my first reel with Gays Against Groomers was about a library in Louisiana that my friend boss, I guess, was being sued because they were being sued by the Library Association president of Louisiana or something like that because they wanted to. She was calling it censorship, and they were literally saying that she wanted to keep this porn in the hands of children, when all that they were trying to do was get these books moved from a public library from the young adult section, which goes down to age 11, to the adult section. So if parents want to check those books out for their kids, they can, but it's not in the reach of these children, so they can open it up and see, you know, these sex manuals is essentially what they are. You know, even at age 11, it doesn't make any sense.
We have the same issue here in Fairfax, where we have secondary schools like at Robinson, where you can have children as young as 11 that can get a hold of those books. And we actually supported on this program the parents up in Dearborn, Michigan, that got a hold of two of them. One was this book is gay, and Flamer actually had like instructions on how to cut oneself. Like this book is gay actually had like a how-to manual. I mean, I agree with you. It goes beyond not just anatomy, but not even like the health, like the sexuality education, which to provide like this is if you are sexually active, this is how you do it safely, so you don't get a disease. So I mean, it goes well beyond that. And to your point, it even uses the shield and straight stuff like the book Seen Gender. That even promotes like sex work and for young girls even traffic themselves. It gives them saying you can make up to $500,000 doing this. So I mean, it's just, but you have activists that'll show up and will say this is going to cause harm to a community if you don't have this book in there, and they want to compare it, like it's in Dearborn, to the Diary of Anne Frank, and you're just like, wait a second, like no. Some books have literary value. Like this is like, so there are other books out there even show children how to make a noose. I just want to make sure I wasn't crazy. I wasn't losing my mind.
No, you're not crazy. I don't get how they think that these things are okay. I think it has to do with I don't know. It has to do with warping consciousness with children as well, because trying to get them again to separate from their parents, and then them see the parents as the bad guys, like trying to get government to own your kids instead of you having responsibility over them.
You bring up
and
a
even
good
the
point.
First Lady said, "Oh, sorry." Even the First Lady
Oh no,
said
I've
books
heard.
should be in libraries, right? But you're like, have you read these books? Have you? Because I'm not into quote censorship either. No one wants to be a censor, right? Like, I used to run to the library, and as soon as somebody told me a book was banned, I would go read it because I'm like, oh, they don't want me to read this, so I must read this, right? Like, but I mean, a lot of it's like, Catcher in the Rye, like 1984, those types of books, and so there are some that I don't think should be on the banned book list. Like I think some people are sensitive, but yeah, so I think that some of them I kind of would like to have. I would like to give the First Lady of the United States genderqueer and be like, I would like you to read this on camera right now and just let me know about this. Like, what, do you know about this book? Or
well, how many times have we seen people at board? How many times have we seen people go to board members and read these books, and then the board members tell them to stop because it's explicit. I've seen people have been arrested for doing this, and it's like, okay, well then why are these allowed in schools?
I've got a good book. It's ages 4 to 8. My Body is Growing. Ages 4 to 8. I would encourage people. I would dare someone to read that. Oh, it's 4 to 8. 4 to 8. It gives a structure on how to. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say the other thing about this too is it's like the same people that are talking about and talking about censorship of books and banning of books and stuff like that are the same people that scream to have Abigail Schreier's book Irreversible Damage or Dr. Deborah So's End of Gender book banned from Amazon. They were trying to get like Amazon to cut it. They were trying to ban that book. They're the ones that are trying to ban Matt Walsh's Johnny the Walrus. It's like, hey, why don't we put? I would actually implore you, go into the schools and see is Johnny the Walrus there? If not, donate it because and then see if they take it out or leave it in, because if you're gonna have one book and then you're gonna scream censorship when people try to remove it.
Target did ban them.
Great point.
the first one. And I mean,
Oh, irreversible
they'll try
damage,
to.
yeah.
If the data is correct, we know that kids across the country have lost more than a year's worth of education, some longer.
I mean, but the whole censorship of speech. I mean, we're seeing a lot of stuff going on even outside of schools. Obviously, right? I mean, Elon Musk is taking over Twitter. The breaking news tonight is the NBA banned Kyrie Irving for 5 games.
And not disavow. Well, I think he brought that on himself. I think he brought that on himself. All right, we disagree. All right.
I mean, the point is, like, if you don't hold the same beliefs as some of the folks, they're not going to let you live in the country. And as we saw with COVID, right? Like a lot of the things that people were saying about, vaccines not being necessary for kids, and that, vaccines make an imprint on the body's immune system. And the more you give it to them, the more the body recognizes a certain variant. And I remember in the first year, a lot of health professionals, and I had posted on my social media page that we want to be careful that we don't train the body on the first variant, because that will make it more difficult for the body to respond to successive variants. And sure enough, folks who have gotten 3 or 4 boosters, right, are more likely to be reinfected with Omicron. And, that was a scientific study that just came out today. So that would have been misinformation or disinformation by the national administration and Biden's administration and the social media companies just a year ago, right? But now, they're having a harder time censor. So it's just, people should be allowed to speak, and then people take and make their own opinions.
Well, Fauci's own words on COVID were misinformation, right? When he said that you would not want to implement a vaccine too early because that could actually make the virus worse, like they saw with another virus, and then he was going on and saying he never said that. I mean, they lie every day about this stuff, and a lot of what if you don't switch your beliefs on their whims, then you are spreading misinformation. And now they want amnesty for how they acted during COVID.
It was timely that you brought this, because I've heard from several people that they were worried because they were not sure what this meant. So I've said it a couple of times, and I want
what is she talking about
tonight, that it would be wonderful to, I would like to get
3 years of running one of the nation's best school systems into the ground, and they're just in their 4th year of their administration. They're like, let's have a plan. Like, things aren't going well. Like, why are we here? Like, what? That look of just being lost.
I agree with you, and that's on me as we navigate this year to determine what's tight and what's loose. And
they're using this as a way to find out what's wrong with the school. You've been at this job for over 3 years. You don't know what's wrong.
Yeah, can you tell election year is next year, Sarah? Like,
next year is next year.
Let's talk about strategic planning.
Next year?
This is we're coming up on they're 4
These
years.
guys, these guys are worse than the military, right? Where you learn how to do your job after the first year, like, well, and then you move to your next one, right? They've been there for 3.
Like, yeah, I mean, in most jobs in the military, you get 6 months. 6 months to a year, and you're basically moved to your next job.
Your next job, right?
It depends. It depends on what rank and grade you are. I mean, as an officer, you spend like 6 months as a platoon leader, and then 6 months as an executive officer, and then you go on staff for a little bit, and then you move on.
Oh, it's even worse, right? They won't send you. Then they send you to school to how to do the job that you were just doing as you leave.
Yeah.
I mean, they do it. They're famous for that. You're going to be a staff officer, but we're going to send you to staffing thing college after your tour. Like, what?
Yeah. I mean,
so you guys...
I got out of the Army as a captain. So I was a logistics officer for 7 years. So I got out as a captain, and yeah, you go to the captain's career course, but a lot of people have been captains for quite a while once you go to the career course, and they teach you how to be a company, or actually they teach you more how to be a staff officer, which you were probably just doing at your last job. You're right.
Yeah, you're right. Like, this is what you should have been doing. Like, thanks.
Yeah, I'm working in ESSER. I'm working in an operations center, so now you teach me how to create the plan that I was doing last year.
Well, at least we know how to create plans. They don't even know what a plan is, or so much even why to have one. Why? This is a plan to make sure, and this is literally the comedy that happened in the last meeting. They have a little graphic. See, a plan to make sure that this called strategic alignment, that all of our activities are moving towards this goal. That's why we have a plan. I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. It's like literally watching Idiocracy.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure tonight. I have to jump off a little bit early, but Deborah Tisler is going to be coming on soon, so you guys maybe can talk a little bit more.
You're gonna sync up with her.
With special education. All right. Awesome.
You're gonna
Thanks a lot, guys.
All right.
Guys, Sarah, and I'll see you guys later.
Okay. See you later.
I think it's very important to look at the specific data because I actually.
All right. So we have Deborah Tisler, who's going to be joining us shortly.
Being tested, and that's that NAEP, assess everybody, and it's really that would be a misnomer. So ROI is critical in looking at individual test scores, and I think Dr. Presidio and his team will have some data for you this evening around the impact of different strategies.
All right. Website, I'm going to just text it. vmixcall.com. I got to look up the code.
And like we talked earlier about being nimble and being able to move quickly to adjust to meet our students' needs. So I'm sure you guys are all working on that.
Well, nimble and adaptive, and Mr. Greenfelter was in the meeting.
All right, so Deborah's going to join us, so we can talk. We can talk about that.
Thank you.
Wow. Wow, we've got over a lot. Sarah, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us as a community? What parents should know? Parents are concerned. Well, this is a big concern in our community.
Great, thank you.
A lot of people have good intentions. I think a lot of people have good intentions, which is why it's so prominent. But like, what are some of like the key takeaways that parents should want to know or should know?
I'm thrilled to hear this presentation.
Well, understand what the theories are that are going on. I mean, you can talk. They have to understand how subversive things are. Like you can talk queer theory, critical race theory, just critical theories in general that are being pushed into schools. Like queer theory is very subversive, but you can, if you look for the key words in these, you can see, okay, they are based upon postmodern neo-Marxism. Basically, you hear equity everywhere. That's a Marxist buzzword, right? Then you look at them saying that basically, actually a study came out this week that showed that like 60% of young people or something like that don't believe in absolute truth, and that is dangerous. So that's your postmodernism right there at work.
More higher level data coming in.
That is concerning. Thank you for joining us. I mean, you're welcome to stay on. I mean, it's been amazing having you join us for the board meeting. I mean, we're just going to continue just to slam away at some of our dismal performance. Love to have you on a special episode, particularly dealing with any specific issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to come on. Just let me know. We'll keep in touch and we'll continue to coordinate. Yeah, I'll let everybody know too if they want to go follow me. Like I said earlier, just go to sarahhigdon.com, or it's Sarah Higdon with an underscore on like Twitter and everything like that. But yeah, I definitely appreciate it. This was fun. I've not sat through a school board meeting like this, so it's interesting because now I'm ready to.
They go on for
now I'm ready to go speak to them. So yeah, I'll hang out for about 10 more minutes and then probably dip out.
Okay, great. Whatever works for you. I don't want you to feel like obligated. Like, hey, I agreed to show up, but then all of a sudden, like, you didn't tell me it was going to be till like midnight. But
yeah,
they literally will go. They will literally go until midnight. So at any time.
Oh yeah.
Brian, do you have anything? We're waiting for. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, usually when I'm on streams, it's like an hour, so it's like, yeah.
No, I appreciate that. And
I think Reed's talking about the scores now, right?
With the chairs and vice chair meeting, you know,
She was.
Unaware that only 176 FCPS students were. That was not.
Is that any better?
So thank you.
Yeah, it's better. It went up. It went up for a little bit.
That was on their end. They must have just had their speaker rather hot because I wasn't even in the studio. I didn't touch it. All right, just let me know.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
All right, awesome.
So, I'm just emailing Deborah.
Thank you. And this is not a work session here. We'll have more chance to ask questions on data when we get to the ESSER presentation on agenda item 4.06.
Oh, now they're going to ESSER.
Say thank you for this. I think this is a great addition to our.
That was an interesting one. Brian, did you ever get a chance to read through some of the?
Agenda item 4.04, student representative. Oh, I'm sorry, Miss O'Make. I thought you. Miss O'Make.
I wonder if Deborah's having a hard time logging in.
Okay, no worries. I didn't see it. No, it's fine.
The ESSER?
Okay, so thank you for.
Yeah. Oh, this is the ESSER fund, so they try to tuck in a lot of material in the ESSER fund. I know Deborah was expected to be was on the list to be a speaker. She can go through her talk later on today.
Spoke to the importance of nuance with looking at the data, all of that, test scores not being reflective. I think these are themes we're aware of and how we view it. But you know, when I remember
who's that scurrying in the back?
About your vision when you came on was that you know we shouldn't just be kind of measuring who made it and you know how we're able to just overcome that threshold to stay accredited and stay above water, but really how are we getting everyone to a higher level of success, right? So that's just something to think about. To me, I don't necessarily celebrate this, though I'm reassured by this, right? So it's telling me that we're in a place where we're above average, which is the bar I'd expect for us, right? But I'd like to see that number be.
Yeah, I think this is going to shift to our blasting CRT and this pedagogy.
The region meetings that
Let's hear what she says, right? Because she's showing her ignorance on.
Was that sometimes we look at adjusted, sometimes we look at unadjusted data, right? And then we also data is hidden for certain groups. So maybe the data is actually telling us that we're not doing so great in how we support certain academic programs, right? Or certain categories of folks, namely SPED, ELL, lower income kids, and actually Black and Hispanic students as well, in terms of what the data has shown us. So how can we kind of target efforts and be intentional about addressing those pieces? Because maybe if we were to break that 77% or whatever it is down, we'd see that we're doing a good job for the average kid, but where are we?
So, sir, you haven't been on some of the earlier conversations, right? So we all come from different backgrounds on the shadow board. I come from Loudon. I have a student in Fairfax and one in Loudon, but for about 8 years been on a push for student growth. So you can think of achievement as, you know, how high you score on a given test in a given grade, right? So they have some tests that are, you know, you continuously increase your score each grade, right? So it's not like 80% for 8th grade, 80% for 4th grade. It's like maybe you get 150 in 4th grade and you're expected to get like 230 in 8th grade. So there's achievement levels, you know, where you are, and then there's growth, which means based on where you started, how much did you grow that year? So you can be behind grade level and kind of catch up and have really good growth. You can be ahead of grade level and then not grow as much as, you know, a typical student, just be, you know, on grade level or slightly above. But those are student growth scores have been around for at least 20 years, and the federal government tied funds to them about a dozen years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, and Fairfax intentionally lied to the U.S. Department of Education, took their money, said we're going to do it, and then didn't download the scores and publicly stated we'll never use them. So all of these things that she was talking about exist, the growth scores exist, so you can compare each individual student and how well Fairfax educated them. And they have intentionally rejected publishing that data. And that is the best way that you can make sure you take care of all students. So for example, at least in Loudon, which tends to have affluent kids and high achievement scores, Black students do not even achieve the 50th percentile in academic growth each year. But yet they push indoctrination and CRT, yet they're not serving the Black students' needs in terms of academic growth. The teachers are not effectively providing instruction. And here, Fairfax is hiding that information. So Kumara Bresh, who's apparently been on the school board 2 or 3 years, went to Yale and apparently is completely ignorant about federal law on growth data, what SGP scores, which Virginia produced for a number of years from like 2011 to 2015 or 16, in which Fairfax should have in terms of iReady and MAP scores. So I'm guessing Bresh has heard of them. She's just intentionally lying to the public, right? This whole show is a facade, and they don't want to be objectively, held objectively accountable. So they just hide the data.
To make sure that their work is taken to another level. I also got to briefly talk with Dr. Reed about our current hiring process and recruitment, and I was able to gain more of an understanding, which really helped me with my perspective. But I was able to meet with our equity ambassadors and discuss where we can kind of be better. Together, we looked into the use of satellite campuses, which I had no idea anything about it originally. And when we were doing our research, it was interesting to see what could be done pretty much. And as always, thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you. As always, it's wonderful. Thank you very much. Agenda item 4.05.
The Superintendent Reed is aware of student growth percentiles and student growth because she just recently came to Fairfax from Washington State. I think it was North Shore School District. Washington State actually generates student growth scores for the district. And when she arrived around 2016 in North Shore District in Washington State, the district had great growth scores. For a district getting like 58th percentile or 60th percentile is extremely high. Typically you won't get that far from the median for a whole district. You can for an individual student, obviously individual classroom, you get 80, 90, 100%. But when you aggregate it to the district for a law of large numbers, you typically get close to the median. Every year she was there, the student growth went down. And I think by the time she left, it was under the 50th percentile from this lady student, Superintendent Reed. She plans to bring that here to Fairfax to dumb down and lower the growth. But she'll talk about equity and all this stuff. What she'll never talk about is, has the annual academic growth of kids improved or gone up, and specifically whether annual academic growth percentiles for minority students, Black, Hispanic, all those students who have, because they honestly don't care. They seriously couldn't care less. It's all about their propaganda and protecting their reputation.
Programs this evening are FCCLA, Family and Consumer Science Programs, and Skylar Kim.
She was superintendent for North Shore for like 4 or 5 years. I went to the first community meeting, asked her about it. She said she had no idea what that was.
And it was quite an exciting event. Excellent food, and we learned a lot about the
basically comes here and just flat out lies. Until I post a social media post later, I'll give her $10,000 that she can pass a lie detector. Repeating that same statement.
Dinosaur. I thought that was somewhat metaphoric. And did have a chance to spend time also at Annandale High School at the Special Olympics soccer tournament Saturday morning, and got a chance to get out on the field and kick the ball around with some of our athletes.
And it's the same thing with all these things. I don't care what group it is, whether it's grouped by racial or special education status or sexual orientation or whatever policy they propose, right? If kids were really being impacted by bullying or by not effective instruction, then you would set up a test and see, does this change improve their academic growth? First of all, they never do it. And so second of all, there's a lot of speculation. We don't have the hard data. There's a lot of speculation that focusing on this ideology, all these critical theories and stuff, and the consternation they've caused, has been one of the reasons our scores have been dropping before the pandemic, right? All of our scores in this Northern Virginia area were falling before the pandemic ever struck. And they refused to put out any hard data or do any, I mean, they could do a test where they took a school or did a random sampling of their kids. They got 180,000 kids. They could easily do, hypothesis testing, right? They never do. Right, and half the statements they say, they're statistics teachers. They teach AP statistics. Half of their statistics teachers just say it's flat out false, right? They just put out conjecture after conjecture.
Our Veterans Day is next week, and want to make sure that folks understand it's a district-wide student holiday, and our schools will be honoring our veterans the week of November 7th. Please check with your child's school to see exactly what they have planned. This is an important day, and I hope that many of you are able to take advantage of being so close to DC by visiting different monuments that have been erected in honor of those who've given their all for us. And then I did also, with a number of board members, have the opportunity to attend the John R. Lewis Leadership Program event. Lewis High School Principal Alfonso Smith hosted. Board members, community members, and members of the late Congressman's family. I think for a really inspiring event that showcased students and staff and the work they're doing to develop that leadership program. And lastly, I just want to share that Katherine Johnson Middle School was again recognized by the Virginia Naturally School Recognition Program by the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources for the 9th year in a row. Other schools that have been recognized are Daniels Run and Progress.
Sorry, I was muted.
And this is really an
Deborah, good evening. How are you doing?
Great. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Deborah Tisler, community leader and activist within the for the needs of those for the disabled community. Welcome and thank you. So we had a lot going on here. So I saw that you were about to speak. Do you want to tell us what you're about to talk about? Oh, first, give us an introduction. Who are you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I'm Deborah Tisler, as you all know. I'm a former teacher for Fairfax County Public Schools. I am what is called a pro bono advocate in the area of special education, almost in an accidental way. Although it was my career, I was sort of thrusted into trying to help and support people as much as I could due to the deficiencies of Fairfax County Public Schools and meeting our students with special needs as IDEA compliance requirements and just their overall civil rights to an appropriate education.
Oh, great. So, so you've been very active. How long have you been active in the Fairfax in our community?
Oh, goodness. Wow. Now you're going to make me date myself, right? Put a timestamp. Since 1997.
Okay, 1997. So you've been around advocating for special needs for quite some time. So one could say that you're kind of an expert with the ins and outs within the community. So a lot has happened tonight. What were your thoughts that the school board could not muster the votes to admonish, but to chastise Karen Keys-Gamarra for her ableist slur at the last school board meeting?
Well, again, I'm going to go back to what I always say. Actions speak louder than words. This is just another action that shows the hypocrisy of this school board. And unfortunately, it's systemic at this point, mostly at the administrative level in our school system, which, trickles down right into the classrooms to the kids. I mean, they feel it. The teachers feel it. Many of the teachers know that what they're doing is complete hypocrisy, and it isn't right for the children. They spent $300,000 trying to strip me of my First Amendment rights, to censure me for producing and showing the public what they're doing in their legal invoices, but they're going to allow their school board member that clearly broke their own governance manual on behavior to continue to speak. Does that make any sense?
No, it doesn't. I'm being a poor host. I'm going to bring this. We have a Brian Davison, regular panelist on the shadow board, and special guest Sarah Higdon, co-founder of Trans Against Groomers and contributor to Gays Against Groomers as well. And this is a very interesting topic because we have a lot of funding that's going towards critical race theory, anti-racism curriculum to bring racial division within our community, as well as we talked about with the transgender policies that they're trying to use, that they've been pushing on our children outside of the knowledge and consent of parents, certainly. So you brought up Karen Keys-Gamarra. It's like actions speak louder than words. Were you surprised that she was absent this evening? She wasn't there in person?
I'm not surprised, because this is about, accountability and being transparent. And I think that if she showed her face, her true colors would still illuminate, and her true feelings. She can't hide it. That's why she's not there. And, that's why she's not there. She can't genuinely give an apology.
Is that audio better, Harry?
Yeah, way better. Thank you. So let's go over like some of the with children, their needs in this community. What are some of the highlighted ways? You've been around since 1997 in this space. What are some of the things? What are some things that they have done, just a highlight of how they are not addressing the needs of the community? There was a great speaker today. We'll talk about that later. They say, why is this community being left out of the discussion with equity? Why is this community being left out of the discussion regarding inclusion? Now, I mean, we'll talk about why the speaker chose to say that. But what are some of the worst things that this school board has done, how they have failed to meet the needs of this community? And what should be done?
Well, first,
I know it's long. You got plenty of time. Plenty of time. Walk us through this.
Numbers speak for themselves too. Look at how they're allocating the funds. And not only that, but the delay in the allocation of funds. So not only do we have minuscule amounts of money for direct services for children, but you have the programming and methodologies attached to that minuscule amounts of money are lacking the evidence for these kids. That's why the scores are horrific, right? Okay, it's like teaching reading.
What do you mean by minuscule? How would you define minuscule?
Well, $9.50 a kid for ESSER funds, for recovery services. $9.50. I don't even think you could buy like a number one meal at McDonald's for these days for $9.50. That's how they value the kids. $9.50.
For which kids?
For the kids in these in Fairfax County Public Schools that require recovery service, the ESSER funds, and specifically our special education kids, $9.50 of the ESSER funds. That's what they're going to allocate. That's what they're set to do. They trimmed it down from $19 to $9.50. I don't even know how they come up with these numbers. It's absurd. That's how they value special education students. And when you look at
how much is spent annually on like tier 1 or special education child by Fairfax?
Well, see, here's the tricky part, is that they take the whole pot of money that they get from federal, state, and local funds, and they divide it up per kid. And they'll say, well, roughly $23,000 is going to go for that special education student, per special education student. But that doesn't directly mean that they'll get $23,000 for that student. There's a whole other factors that they've used that money for that have been allotted, say, for transportation or the buildings or administrators. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting $23,000 of direct instructional services for that child. It doesn't mean that you're getting $23,000 in speech and language services or occupational therapy services, for example. It doesn't mean that they're going to get that.
Just for the public, like how much is a general education student? How much is spent on a general education student versus a special education student each year?
It's between $14,000 to $17,000 has been spent historically within the past couple of years for your general education student. So that's a pretty high price tag, right? but the kids are not getting the direct services. Even the general education students, even our ESOL students are not getting those direct services that they need. And the core of that is literacy instruction, right? For some reason, this school board, and our school system has been unable to teach kids how to read appropriately, and to the level where they can not only read, but write proficiently and then spell. I mean, I sat in meetings where they said kids don't need to learn how to spell. And it's okay. IB kids, advanced learners aren't spelling. So it's okay. We don't have to teach it. I mean, these are the words that are used throughout the system. So if they're saying that your advanced learners don't need to learn how to spell, what does that say for everyone else? I mean, spelling is very important. We know that. You need to know how to spell your words so that you can communicate effectively, right? And so, that's just one example of how they're just letting the kids flounder.
What has the impact been to the community with the year of lost learning? How do they arrive to not providing services at all for a year during the pandemic?
It's huge. It's astronomical. And for the kids, in the words of Fairfax County Public Schools, their administrators called it streamlining, that they streamlined the graduation process to exit students out rapidly. Now, this came from an administrator that was also responsible for implementing what they called a business model in Fairfax County Public Schools, where when you go to the insurance company and you submit in your insurance bill and they make you keep resubmitting it to get services, that's what they implemented. So these kids got streamlined out, graduated, they're not reading proficiently, they're not doing math proficiently. Higher education has acknowledged that these kids, not just in Fairfax County Public Schools, but nationwide, are struggling right now in college. And there's nothing in place for them at all.
You mentioned things that are in place. There's a couple of questions here. Actually, I don't want to take up more or Sarah's time than she has. I mean, I know it's late. This is going to go for a while, Sarah. Are there any issues with within the community regarding some of the new transgender policies and initiatives that the school board has been pushing? Or is the question not clear enough? Hello? Can you hear me? No? Was that a clear question or no? Can you hear me? Testing 1, 2, 3. Thumbs up if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I guess the question is there an increase in how to phrase that? Because I believe that correct me if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm ignorant on this one, but aren't children with autism, are they more susceptible to try to transition under the new policies and curriculums that they're pushing? Okay, you're shaking your head yes. Okay, so I am kind of on that point. Go ahead and jump in. Save me on this one if I correctly frame the question. You're muted. You want to test your mic?
All right, am I unmuted now?
Okay, no, you're good. You're good. Now I can hear you. Okay.
Okay. Oh yeah. So I don't know how much it is with a lot of the stuff happening in schools. I do know that a lot of the transitioners right now are young females, and part of that issue is because for the longest time, Asperger's, all the diagnosis criteria was for males. And after speaking with a few of my friends that are diagnosed with it now, that are females, the way that they describe how Asperger's presents itself very much like gender dysphoria. And so that's one of the reasons why, yes, we're seeing a huge spike in people that are autistic being diagnosed with gender dysphoria.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm having issues with my mic. So.
No, thank you for jumping in. I just wanted to make sure that I was asking an intelligent question there on the subject matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
So wow, so there's we're just, I guess, transitioning back to you, Deborah. I mean, just seeing that shift. Has there been a shift of resources instead of providing core education towards some of these social justice initiatives that have led to this type of increase? Have you observed it or not? I mean, you're only one person, but yeah.
Not only has there been a shift, but the appropriate instruction that is evidence-based for the unique needs of the child that's supposed to be accessing and receiving this information, it's not there. So in special education, we use this word called modifications, right? You modify the curriculum for the needs of the child, right? So they can understand it. I don't see in the teacher trainings or in any of the documentation where this information regarding gender dysphoria, gender expansiveness has been modified to meet the needs of students with disabilities, specifically if we're going to focus on autism, the autism spectrum. I'm not seeing that anywhere, and it's very concerning to me.
Let's talk about some of the other issues that I've heard mentioned within this community. When they talk about seclusion and restraint, what are they doing that parents should be aware that would be that most of us would find abhorrent? I found it important when I heard about it.
Well, from someone that has, been an advocate and attending meetings and hearing parents and the sobbing of parents, I mean, it's heartbreaking. Their children were not only physically harmed, but mentally harmed, traumatized, to the point where they have physical bruises on them, physical harm from being put into what's basically, I'll just call it what it is, illegal restraints, such as headlocks. I had a mother that came in to school and saw her child in a headlock, right? They put them in these rooms. They claim to be their seclusion, a safe room, their safe space. Well, first of all of schools should be a safe space. And they just leave them there unattended. I mean, some children would strip down, harm themselves, urinate on themselves. They leave them in there, these children in there that long, and then they just dress them up and put them back on the bus and not tell the parents that any of this happened. And on top of it, they destroyed the documents or any documentation identifying that these types of incidences were occurring. And when, there's other advocates out there that I'm sure could explain more on the situation of the class action lawsuit that was filed on behalf of students that were restrained and secluded. But in the invoices that we received through the FOIA request last year, that is Callie Ottinger and myself, another advocate, it was clear that this school board was allowing their attorneys to basically try and dismantle that class action suit, to ruin the chances of these parents of receiving the damages, the funding that they need to repair and heal not only their children, but also themselves. It's heartbreaking. Like you put your baby on the bus, and a very vulnerable child on the bus, and you have no idea that they're being abused like this, and that the teachers just smile along. They were smiling along and not letting the parents know that these things were happening. And so you have to find a way to heal and bring that trust back. And I don't see that school board doing this.
This is tough to get through. Have parents that have tried to advocate for their children? Have they had child protective services called upon them?
Yes, they have. They've had child protective services on them. They've had truancy officers put on them. So, parents of children, especially those that can't afford private representation, which is very hard to find in Northern Virginia because the big law firms have scared them off, have found that they're trying to protect their child. They know their child was harmed and they're trying to get services, and the school system sends the truancy officers to their house when the doctor has put in a note to the school system stating that the child is traumatized, is demonstrating anxiety, needs X, Y, and Z, can't return to school. They're supposed to provide services at the home for the child. Instead, they put the truancy officer on the parent for not sending the child to the school where they have been traumatized and harmed.
Let's go into. It's a lot to take in.
Before we get into anything else, I gotta say my goodbye.
Thank you. I told you you are. Thank you so much. Before you go, any final thoughts? Any you mentioned before? Any last plugs for your show? If people want to follow you, Twitter handle or
like I said, just the easiest way to find all my content. So all the articles I've written, because I've been writing a lot in human events and the post millennial. Those are everything's on my website. All my social media handles, everything like that. It's all on my website. It's just sarahhigdon.com. And you can go on there and find everything else. And then my Twitter handle is just Sarah Higdon with an _. So just find me there.
Thank you so much. Thank you again for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye. All right. So let's go into occupational therapy. Do children in this community, do they have the same opportunities to take elective courses as other children in our county when they get to high school? Or are they incentivized to take something else in order? I guess what I'm leaning for, I've had it reported to me that some of the children are incentivized to not pass elective classes in order to receive occupational therapy courses until the age of 25. Is that an accurate statement?
Are you talking about I think what you're talking about, Harry, is career and transition, like career credit type courses.
Yes. Career and technical education.
Right.
Yes.
Career and technical education, right? So there's definitely a disparity when you look at the scores, and anyone can do this. You go to the VDOE website and you look up the school profile and the county scores. Students with special needs have a disproportionate amount where they're getting standard diplomas or GEDs instead of an advanced diploma. And when you talk about special education, you have a wide variety of children, right, with needs and strengths. This system does not account for that. For example, there's something in special education called team taught classes where you have a general education teacher and a special education teacher, and they work together to teach the class. And they don't have these opportunities in the quantity that they should in the honors level and the AP level, which is problematic, right? Then you have children struggling to get an advanced diploma. Then just to get a standard diploma, or even what they're calling a type of modified diploma, getting a variety of work experience for that is challenging too through Fairfax County Public Schools. We're finding a lot of our students that have IEPs are getting shuffled into janitorial or working at McDonald's type jobs. They're not experiencing the full spectrum, right? And the whole point of the funding that they receive is to allow the students to experience a variety of workplace settings. To see what...
You're not saying that the special education community should have the same participation rate on AP exams as the general education population, right?
No, what I'm saying is that each child, based on their unique needs, should have the opportunities. to do what is appropriate for them. They should have those doors open for them. The fact that we have AP and IB and honors level classes that are inaccessible because they don't have support services from a special education teacher in there, that's problematic. Now you have to understand special education is a huge spectrum of students with their unique needs, right? And you have students that are also twice exceptional. You have students with giftedness that have been determined to have 130 plus IQ, but have a disability such as dyslexia, which is a specific learning disability, impacts language. It's a language-based learning disability, right? Their opportunities too have been limited. So you have to look at each child and their unique needs and their strengths. And you have to have that spectrum of opportunity for them to access that. And that's what's not happening.
Where can the viewers go to see specific data that demonstrates the points you're making?
Right. So if you want to look at the data points regarding diplomas that have been earned and graduation rates, and the SOL scores and such, you can go to the Virginia Department of Education. They have the school profile. So you can Google Virginia Department of Education school profiles and Fairfax County Public Schools. And in there, you can look at the data.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say that's what I'm saying. Like, so obviously there's a spectrum of students, but to be just factual, a lot of special education students have academic, or limited or challenged academically or intellectually, right? So it doesn't make sense for a viewer to say, what's the SOL score of the average special education student versus general education student. They don't know how much to adjust it, right? They don't know how much to adjust it. So I'm saying I think it would help viewers, support the cause if we had, specific metrics that are apples to apples, right? So for example, I think the recent lawsuit against Fairfax and VDOE that said only 1.5% of parents are successful when they have, a hearing against the school to get an IEP for their kid or get services for their kid in Virginia, whereas like 30% are successful in other states, right? That's an apples to apples comparison that says, hey, there's data to support their argument that Virginia and Fairfax are not treating them similar to other states, right? But nobody can say, well, the average SOL score for special education students is lower than general education students. You make a conclusion without more information, right?
Well, I'm unsure as to, what those conclusions are. Every student has the right to reach their goals and and to aspire to their talents and strengths. And in that question is, servicing and providing the supplementary aids and services for their needs. The majority of students in special education are average to above average intelligence. And it's only supposed to be.
So let me repeat. You're making the claim. This is the first time I've ever heard this, that the typical student who's special education is average to above average intelligence.
The majority of the students in special education are have average to above average intelligence. It's only a small portion of students. It's generally around 1%, as the VDOE likes to keep it to, is that 1% monitoring for students that are geared for an applied studies diploma based on their cognitive needs and abilities. So the majority of students in special education are average to above average student, and there's a higher percentage over students that have more intellectual cognitive needs as well as functional needs that are twice exceptional, that are gifted, that have been identified as gifted. So for example, I'll give you an example. Do you want an example of like a cognitive profile of what that might look like? I could break it down a little bit for you and for the viewers. And these kids, they're getting left behind. I mean, every person can reach a potential where they can be participants in their communities and society.
No, absolutely. I totally agree. We should be customizing. We should be having content where every child can reach their fullest potential, and they're failing to provide those opportunities for these children. I'm sorry, Brian. I mean, you got a lot of more other questions. I mean, you have so. Go ahead. You guys are having a great dialogue.
My point is that, like, I think we need to be very careful because the school board is constantly giving false data out, right? That if we make a claim that the majority of special education are average or above average, to support that with data, not anecdotes, right? And so I'm just saying, can you point the viewers to a site that has objectively collected data on that?
Yeah, I can definitely provide that, and you can put it up through your sites. But it's I have a master's degree in special education, and I have reviewed data. I have reviewed hundreds of profiles, thousands of profiles, actually. And I can tell you the majority of students that are serviced are average to above average IQ. What you're thinking about?
Oh no, go ahead. I'll let you finish that before I go to ask my question.
No, it's just I think what's hard for people that this isn't their field, and a lot of the times we you're also thinking about when you talk about specific learning disabilities. I'll just give that as an example. It's an invisible disability. You can't really see that disability, right? That's why it's called an invisible disability. So you don't know if the child has a language learning disability, but has a high IQ of 130, right? Like I have a student that I know.
I mean, I'm reading from the National Library of Medicine on a report that's talking about kids who are on the autism spectrum, right? And it's talking about that, the majority do have some intellectual disability.
Okay, so you're talking about one specific area of eligibility under IDEA. You're talking about autism here. I'm talking about overall. And again, even within autism, each person is unique. Just like you're unique, I'm unique, Harry's unique, Sarah's unique. We are each unique in our cognitive abilities, right? It's the same thing in special education. And so overall, students in special education have average to above average abilities. And there's a large portion of students that are twice exceptional. I know of a student that has abilities in certain cognitive domains of 160. Like he tops out the charts.
Wow.
Right?
But you understand that when I hear somebody mention an anecdote to substantiate a claim, right? That causes alarm bells to ring in my head. I'm not an expert in this field. You raise the suspicions that in my mind, if you're not accurate in that claim, I just fear people will turn out every single thing you say. And
that's
that
fine.
seems to be.
Why wouldn't you think? Why do we think? Or how is this? Why would someone think that just because someone is in receiving IDEA eligible services that they wouldn't have average or above average abilities or be gifted?
So I'm not saying that you can't be. We're talking about the average or the mean, right? But.
Well, you guys are. She's pointing out the data that she's referencing, and you're pointing out a specific report. Let's highlight.
Yeah, and that report itself. Let's talk specific autism. Yeah.
Right. Let's talk about the bigger issue here, right? So we have a school board with a $4 billion budget, right? And they've used ESSER funds to push social justice projects on the community, and they haven't been addressing academic performance across the board for everyone. But who have they victimized? Who were the losers under the school board? And was it the special needs community? I mean, they certainly didn't improve the conditions and the performance of those that they wanted to help the most, the Black and Hispanic community. Those scores aren't improving. But who do they victimize? Who are they harming? And you have a school board member who's a guardian ad litem who should really know better, who uses ableist slurs. They won't censor her at all for this, and they can't muster the support to do that. And I mean, let's just talk about some of the issues. Deborah, are there enough teachers, qualified teachers and instructors in this to support the needs of this community?
No, they're not, and they can't recruit them either, because Fairfax County Public Schools, the word on the street is don't work for them, because you'll get retaliated against if you speak up. Working conditions are terrible. You have to do ridiculous trainings that are, worthless trainings. You have to spend your time doing that. Then you have to go to meetings with administrators that if you speak up in disagreement could retaliate against you. You have an upper echelon of administrators that are at Gatehouse and Willow Oaks that even have breastfeeding pods. And here you are, a working mom, and you have to go sit in the janitor's closet to go pump your breast milk, while your colleagues at Willow Oaks and Gatehouse have their own little private pods and workout rooms, cafeterias, and you're just trying to get your 20 minutes to go to the bathroom and pee and pump your milk. I mean, the disparity in how teachers are treated compared to the upper echelon administrators, it's glaring. No one wants to work for Fairfax. They have a reputation to not work for them, and that's a problem. And they refuse to accept that and deal with it.
There was an interesting article brought to my attention. They talked about less than 1% of applicants are placed in private placement. What is private placement?
Private placement is, you could have two. You could have publicly funded private placement, whereas the IEP team has determined they cannot meet their needs in the Fairfax County Public Schools, so they will pay for the child to be placed privately to go to school. Then you have basically parent funded. Parent has decided this isn't the setting placement, this isn't the placement for the child, and they will fund. Now, here's another issue at Fairfax, since you brought it up. Under Section 611 and 614, funds are supposed to go from the federal government to parents that have placed their child in private school and are homeschooling. They're supposed to receive special education services. Where's that money going?
Well, let's dig into this before. So, parents are homeschooling the children. Are parents being told, we're going to reimburse you for expenses if you pay for private instruction? Go ahead. Are they creating any barriers to reimbursing parents?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. So tutors in this area are up to $120 an hour. And Fairfax County Public Schools is telling parents, go ahead and pay for the tutor fees and we'll reimburse you. They're not getting reimbursed. The parents are not getting reimbursed. I know one mother, single mom, she took on a second job because they told her she had to pay for the tutoring first and they'd reimburse her. They owe her thousands of dollars. They tried to pull that trick on me and tell me the same thing. I said, no, you're going to invoice the tutor and you'll pay them directly. And they refused to do it. If the lawyers that they pay up to $750 an hour for can get paid directly by them, they can certainly pay for the tutors directly for the children.
Are there any bureaucratic barriers that families face in order to get an IEP? And if so, what are they?
Goodness, that could be like a whole day's worth of a show.
Well, this
yes.
This could be a series because I think I would say that it is. I think you would agree with me that there needs to be a top-down. There needs to be a complete review in this area. Get rid of the school board and do a complete review. Bring in If you're going to hire consultants, don't bring in your DIE consultants. Bring in some consultants that can too, like, this is how it's supposed to be. This is best practices. This is what we recommend. These are some of the problems. Let's correct some of these issues. And let's talk about what these issues are that the school board has allowed to be continuous and ongoing. So, I mean, like, are there barriers to getting an IEP? And what are some of the tricks? What do they do?
Absolutely. Yes. So right now I'm trying to support a couple of families trying to get just that. And I sat at a meeting recently where the parent asked for the data. So the screening data, basically the reading, how did their child perform on the reading assessments, the math assessments that they gave them, the county-wide assessments. And I know, because I used to work for them, it takes about 5-10 minutes. You log in, you hit print PDF, you send it to the printer. Here you go, mom and dad, and I'm going to explain it to you too. Let's break this down about your kiddo. They told this parent it's going to take a couple of days to give them that data. That's like a huge barrier. One, how can the parent know how to support their child at home? How could they even write a referral to get an IEP if they don't have that data? Because very often the parents are going in and they're getting gaslit. That's a barrier, Harry. They're saying my kid can't read. I'm sitting with them. They're not reading. And Fairfax can say whatever they want if they can't show you the paper, which is the data on how the child did on the assessments, right? So that's a huge barrier. And part of that is, the viewers out there, is the screening process. Fairfax County Public Schools receives a lot of money from the federal government to screen children as early as the infant and toddler program. Actually, from the child, when the child is born, they are responsible for finding students for children that require special education services. It's called Child Find. From the time the child is born, they're supposed to have information and advertising at the hospitals, at the pediatrician's offices, at the preschools. It's their responsibility to seek and find these children. But they're not doing that. And they're also not providing the training for parents that, something developmentally, it's just not happening with my child. My pediatrician too is noticing something. They don't know how to fill out the referral forms. Even if the pediatrician says, hey, I'm noticing something is happening here. Your child is not developing at the milestones that they're supposed to, right? Parents are left empty-handed because they're not providing, the Fairfax County Public Schools, with all the money they have, don't provide the training for the parents on how to fill out a referral form to get to even to the table.
It's frustrating because they'll pay $40,000. They'll pay $20,000 for a 40-minute CRT lecture, but this could be simply an instructional video that they can make available on their website, accessible via mobile phone to guide parents on this issue. When a parent gets, because there was interesting here, because I want to really address this issue, what might be considered, I guess, controlled opposition, because this is an outrage. I mean, Brian, would you agree? I mean, this is just unacceptable.
Well, I mean, I think overall it's a tough challenge, right? Because parents want the maximum support for their children, right? And oftentimes there's a conflict. I mean, the law says that generally they have to provide more than a de minimis improvement in education, but they're not on the hook for an unlimited. So that's where in my mind, I see two main issues, right? I see, number one, the schools say dyslexia is a medical evaluation that we're not qualified to make. And so that often dyslexia can obviously be mitigated, but the schools it seems like, omitting a lot of dyslexic students from IEPs.
Well,
and that's
let's raise our target profile. Our school district is paying for deployment teams for a child that wants to come out and transition. They prioritize that over this issue. I hear what you're saying. You can't afford every capability.
They spend $174 million a year on special education services. So it's not like there's not money spent, right? There is money that's left over that's not being spent. So in addition, the dyslexic issue is concerning because I think everybody in the community recognizes that dyslexia can be mitigated, and that if done, that there shouldn't be these significant delays in learning to read, and that the kids can go on to be very successful. And so, by them excluding them from the IEPs, it's very concerning. And then the second one is the recent lawsuit that said 1.5% of special education parents who go to a due process hearing in Virginia succeed, versus up to 30% in other states. So that's 20 times.
Yeah, let's talk.
Right?
Let's talk about that. Let's focus on that. You said 1.5% get into private placement, right?
No, I'm saying that of the parents who you can, if you have a disagreement over the IEP, their services provided or whether they qualify, you have to go through special state administrative procedures. You can't go straight to court, right? So you have to go through a due process hearing. The due processing hearing officers are appointed by the state. And so there's a lot of speculation that the state, because the due processing hearing officers, basically retired judges, oftentimes make a lot of money from this, that they are appointed by the state because the state knows that they're going to side for them, or else they don't have to reappoint them. And that, so once the due process hearing officer makes a determination of facts, right? So just like we think about juries decide whether the facts, right? They don't decide the law, but the hearing officers are deciding the facts. And once they've done that, even if you appeal it to like a federal court, the federal court has to defer to that hearing officer. So this hearing officer is extremely, extremely important. And according to the data in this lawsuit, which I haven't researched, but I have no reason to disbelieve it, there's a 20 times, right, 2,000%, right, difference between how many times Virginia parents are successful when they go to a hearing officer and said, my child is not getting the services that they need, versus when parents in other states go to their hearing officers and ask for the same thing.
Wow, that's
so. I want to hop in there real quick. So the reason why parents file due process complaints and go that far, I mean, it's extremely taxing, stressful, and financially wearing on parents to do that. Because that $174 million, that sounds so wonderful and big, isn't spent appropriately. What they use that money for, the programs are not evidenced for what the children need. So the children don't progress. That's why the parents are put in that situation to file that due process complaint. And this federal courts will defer to what the hearing officer wrote. They're going to look at the entire administrative record. But if that hearing officer did not come to a finding or a determination or ruling that was regularly made, meaning they followed the procedures and regulations that they are supposed to adhere to as a hearing officer, as well as understanding and applying the appropriate case law, then that's an issue that can be used to overturn that due process complaint. A big piece of this is that a lot of the parents don't have the money to go to federal court to appeal. And the school system knows that. Fairfax County Public Schools knows it. And that's why they fight the parents tooth and nail. They do a lot of billable hours. They file motion after motion after motion after motion, literally, to drain the parents. Because every time they file a motion, if they hire someone, they have to pay for that attorney to respond.
Well, I mean, I'm not here to get into legal discussion. As I always have to say, I'm not a lawyer. I don't give legal advice, but I am familiar with the federal court processes, right? And Harry, some nuances here, right, are that IDEA, which is the federal law that requires special education, is very nuanced, right? You have to make a request every year. If you don't get the services you need like a year ago, then and you don't do it in time, that's gone, right? And you can only do it for the current year. And people, there's a lot of discussion about when you elect people for a school board, you're electing on what they should do. The law is different. It's not what should happen for a student. It's what the law requires for a student. So for example, Fairfax doesn't have to put a student in the best program for them or what the parents thinks is best, right? They have a requirement to, provide, a program that's suited for that, what's identified as a need, right? So for example, if they have, speech or reading issues, and they say, okay, we have a teacher, we're going to take them out for, 30 minutes a week for one-on-one or whatever it is. If they have a basis for saying that's sufficient, then they're going to win, right? And there's nothing the federal court can do about it. And that's just the way the law is written, right? But what's troubling to me is, what I've seen in Loudoun is that they exclude parents from even having an IEP altogether. At least if you have an IEP, you're going to get some services, right? Most of these due process hearings about whether a student should have an IEP, and then when they do have an IEP, whether there should be some other speech therapy or some other special services about what they have. If the school provides something that's calculated to help that kid and they're providing that service, even if it's not effective, there's very little parents can do about it. That's just the federal law. If people don't like that, they can either elect different school board members who will say, we're not going to go based on the law, we're going to go based on what we should do right by the kids or whatever, or they can elect federal legislators who can change the law. But oftentimes parents don't understand the process, haven't read the case law, and even some attorneys I've conversed with, they have unrealistic expectations of when they go. But the reason why the data is so important is there's almost no situation in which only 1.5% of parents in Virginia would succeed, but 30% of parents in another state succeed under the same federal law, right? That just the likelihood of that happening is basically nil to none. And so for them to, this case I think has a very good chance of winning just because at the higher level, they've done the work and gotten the data, and it's not anecdotes, right? It's large amounts of data.
And I just want to point you to something since you're bringing up some of those regulations, and I want to make a few clarifications. So what I'm holding up here on the screen is a booklet that's in PDF format that anyone can get, and it's called Regulations Governing Special Education Programs for Children with Disabilities in Virginia. Now, I heard you bring up a few comments like the words de minimis, and that, it's not necessarily the best education for the child or what the parent necessarily wants. But the specific regulatory language surrounding a free and appropriate public education states, the Virginia Department of Education has a goal of providing full educational opportunity to all children with disabilities aged birth through 21, inclusive. And that's in the Code of Virginia. That's backed with 34 CFR 300.101, 34 CFR 300.109. And I emphasize there full educational opportunity, right? A free and appropriate public education shall be available to all children with disabilities who need special education-related services. And what has happened with the case law obstructing that access to full educational opportunity is that we have extremely large law firms that are sucking off the teat of school boards. And they are going in and they are basically legislating from the bench. That's their whole goal, because they know parents are vulnerable, that they don't have the money to fight them. So instead of going the whole lobbying route and changing the laws, and plus that might make them look bad, they're going through the back door, through the court system, and making case law that way. They're withholding records from parents. So parents are going to these due process hearings in Virginia, and the hearing officers are not allowing them to have access, that's discovery, to their children's records. And it's more than just 1 year. It's 2 years, or until you found out about whatever the issue is at hand for your child. So say, for example, your child is now in 4th grade, right? And you only found out that when they were in kindergarten, they failed all of their screening tests for reading, for literacy, or the screening tests to determine whether or not there's characteristics of dyslexia that they need to look at. No one gave you that data. You can go back on that. That's what the regulations state. It's what you knew, what you had in front of you. So if you don't get access to your child's education records, That's why they're not giving it, because you can't go back then on issues. I mean, it's a parent's right to have access.
I just want to be careful. I mean, I don't know the specifics of the cases that you're talking about. I've looked at a couple dozen federal case law on these IDEA laws, and I don't have it in front of me now, but I'm almost positive that when you go to a due process hearing, you absolutely have the right to discovery. You can subpoena records. FERPA obviously give parents the right to get access any child record, and I think they have up to 90 days to provide that. And parents can go to the Office of Civil Rights, U.S. Department of Education, and provide it. The issue is not, I mean, oftentimes parents are not familiar with the process, and it's actually one of the few places where you don't actually have to have a lawyer to go to a due process hearing. You can get an advocate who, maybe has some legal experience, or, has done some stuff pro se, or, these advocates where you don't necessarily have to pay a lawyer, but you obviously want to make sure they know what they're doing. But I don't fault the lawyers. The lawyers are supposed to advocate for their clients, to the fullest degree. And the lawyers for the schools are advocating, for the school boards, right? And maybe we say that the school boards should have oversight. I mean, this is when we talk about governance. The school board should have oversight hearings of their special education administrators and ask them, how are they actually implementing their policies, right? Because if they're, trying to exclude parents, then the school board should be able to correct that. To me, the main issue is judges. Anytime a judge can determine what the facts conclude, right? In other words, a finding of fact that yes, the school did provide adequate services, or no, they didn't. That's a factual finding based on the facts presented by both sides. Then parents are never allowed to get to a jury. They're never effectively allowed to get to a federal judge to make this determination. And if there's any chance that the hearing officers are biased, that is a huge problem. And so the question is, if you went into a dispute with somebody else, would you allow your opponent in a civil case to pay for the judge who's going to be used to decide the case? That's effectively what's going on here. And it's not a dispute, right? Everybody acknowledges that VDOE and Fairfax are paying for the judges who's making the decision whether the Virginia government schools are adequately providing services, right? And I think what the lawsuit is asking for is, at a minimum, the funds can be provided for an independent person. For example, if you're on Medicare or Medicaid and you go to a doctor, you're not going to a doctor paid for by the government, who's on the government payroll. And if they prescribe you something, maybe the doctor will be fired from the government hospital, right? You're going to an independent doctor who can make their own determination. And to me, that's the main issue. The case law can be, if there's a legal error, that can absolutely go to federal court, and you can take it all the way up to Supreme Court, right? So there's no hands that are tied if there's a legal error based on the case law. The problem is the federal law says we didn't want federal judges to make all these findings of fact or go to a jury. It's too expensive. So they said you have to have state administrative procedures, and these hearing officers are the jury, basically, who are making the determinations. And if they're paid by the other side, any person with common sense knows that you're fighting way, way uphill.
And so I just want to add there about the attorneys. No, you're absolutely right. Everyone has the right to have legal representation. But there's a fine line between that and having the legal representation for the school board misrepresent the fact in pleadings, misrepresent regulations to the hearing officer, and then fight parents tooth and nail on subpoenas for access to their child's education record, which is a right in IDEA and Virginia regulations that a parent has the right to expect and review any document that has been used to determine FAPE, right? The parent has that right. They're fighting the parents tooth and nail. The hearing officers are then denying the subpoenas for that right that should just happen. You shouldn't need a subpoena. I know personally, they've withheld thousands of pages of documents of my own child thousands.
I mean,
I was told that they found my son's.
Did you file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education,
Absolutely.
Civil Rights Department?
Absolutely.
What did they conclude?
This goes to the FERPA office. It goes to the FERPA office. Many FERPA complaints have been sent in to that office, including from Special Education Action. And
what did they conclude?
Nothing's happening.
Brian,
Nothing happens. That's the problem. There's a holdup at the federal level, and there's a holdup at the Virginia Department of Education level on these issues, especially on.
You have three. You have three. I'm just saying. I want. I mean, obviously, we got people.
I know
coming
it's
in
hard
and
to understand, but it happens.
So, just so the viewers understand, you got three ways to get records on your child in such a situation. Number one. Well, actually, four ways, right? You have the one is the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. Any educational record you can request. If they don't give it to you, you can sue them and you get your fees back. Number two is the Virginia Data Dissemination Act, 2.2.3800, where you can request records about yourself or your child as an agent. They don't give you records, you can sue them and get your money back, right? Number three is FERPA, which is a federal law that applies from the feds to the states. You can't sue under FERPA, but the U.S. Department of Civil Rights generally takes those complaints seriously, and they can ask the schools to explain themselves. And if they find that you haven't done it, they can force them to make consent decrees, because if the schools don't cooperate, they can actually withhold all of their federal funds, which is up to 10% or more of their funding.
That's if they actually open up an investigation.
And then the fourth way is that once you get into a hearing officer, you can issue a subpoena, which they absolutely have to respond. And if they don't respond to the subpoena, that generally is something that's appealable. Unlike a finding of fact, the only way you can appeal it if there is an obvious, a clear, and I forget the exact word, but it's a clear error. So in other words, unless you're absolutely positive that the data cannot possibly support that hearing officer's conclusion, you lose, right? With a legal error, such as like a subpoena, then if it's just, hey, if they made a legal error, you win when you appeal. So this is why factual findings are a whole other order of magnitude more difficult to appeal than the legal error. So just want to ensure that we're accurate and that the parents understand. Obviously, everybody who goes to court feels they should have won, and I'm not saying that we don't have biased judges. I absolutely know for a fact, Harry can attest to that we have biased judges.
We talk about TJ, Fourth Circuit,
So I just want to touch base. So I'm so glad that you're positive, but I would love for you to join my journey and to go to some of these due process hearings and come to a roundtable with the advocates that I work with. And I have like a ton of evidence. Let's talk about fact finding where and transcripts with hearing officers where they've denied subpoenas for the education record. Parents requested their child's education records, thousands of dollars the school systems ask for, thousands to get their child's records.
All right, we've got
it's absolutely, Harry, it's just absolutely horrendous. Yeah. But parents need to understand though that you just can't give up if you're in that situation, and you have to go through the process. You have to write your requests for the records. You definitely have to step through that process, but it's not as easy as, unfortunately,
so we're going to have Sam come in because he's got to wrap up a little bit. So on you say about activists and advocates, because I think this has to be addressed. When a child gets placed for private education, using public funds for private education, is there a time limit on that? Or are there any unusual circumstances? And what I'll tie into this is that does our school board tend to cherry pick which advocates they want to look to that have some anomalous sweetheart deal with the school board? If you want to touch that or not, you don't have to.
Oh, I can't speak on behalf of every single advocate that's out there,
Right. Okay.
I can't. Okay. I can tell you that there definitely is more favoritism towards certain advocates than others, especially if there's, a political or religious alliance with administrators.
Yeah, let's go there.
Or school board members. There's definitely that component. And I'm only just speaking through personal experience.
Yeah. Maybe we should have this for another time, right? Is there an advocate that has a specific political alliance, and are they personally benefiting to a level that receiving service for their child that others don't receive? I think that'd be interesting. That may come out a little bit later. So, what were your thoughts about some of the speakers tonight? Anything interesting? Anyone who might have spoken out who might be a little hypocritical?
Well, I saw some. I know that speaking of the ESSER funds, my ears were focused mostly on the parents that were begging for help. The one mom that felt her child has been harmed. So the hypocrisy itself is the lack of response from the school board to the parents that come up in front of them, pouring their hearts out with their children's stories.
Hope is coming. Stay strong. There's going to be an election next year.
Yep. There's definitely going to be change.
We can make a change. All right, I'm going to let Sam know we're ready to wrap up. Brian, final thoughts?
No, I think we should continue to watch the school board strategic plan. That's their guiding document. Particularly, it's the guiding document to the administrators of how to effectively administer their policies. And it can touch on everything from, special education, rigorous academic instruction, vocational opportunities, right? That's effectively what the administrators will be measured on. So would encourage the public to stay tuned on that, and then to demand that the school board and the administrators give apples to apples comparison. If I were coaching LeBron James's children in a basketball team, I would expect to have better results than if I were just coaching average kids, right? So Fairfax is one of the most affluent communities. So when they gaslight you by saying we scored higher on average than Virginia, even though we have more affluent and more kids who are the children of doctors, lawyers, engineers, and things like that, they're knowingly trying to mislead you with that data. They do have the data to do an apples-to-apples comparison, but we'll just continue to ask the viewers to make academic progress the main thing, and to ensure that the school board members are accountable.
Thank you. Deborah, thank you for joining us. I hope to have you on for a series on education matters. We can provide content for parents within the community on how to navigate the Fairfax County public school system. It's complex. I can understand. I can only imagine the anxiety a parent would be feeling if they realize that their child is going to require these services, and the difficulty and the barriers are put before them. Hopefully, we will have new school board members that will remove these barriers after the next administration. Deborah, your final thoughts.
Yeah, I always hope for change. Every day is a new day, right? That, the people that are on the school board right now will make that change that's needed for the kids to receive that full educational opportunity, all children. And they need to stop and start asking themselves some real questions as to how are we going to operate? Are we going to keep letting things run awry and run wild and not hold central office accountable and take care of these kids?
Thank you. Keep up the fight. Thank you for all that you've done in the community.
Yep.
Okay,
and please
this wraps
join
up.
Me anytime. Yeah.
Well, we'll have you back. We'll have you back on Education Matters. Okay, so this concludes. This concludes. This is to wrap up another episode of the Shadow Board. Unfortunately, we don't have anything to report from the working session because it was canceled prematurely, probably because there was some infighting between the school board members. Thank you again. Thank you to our guests, Sarah Higdon. She had to leave a little bit earlier. Stephanie, Brian, Deborah. Thank you, and thank you for joining us. And have a good evening. Good evening if you're watching this during the day from pre-recording. This is the Shadow Board. I'm Harry Jackson, signing off.